If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon, link is in the description. Additionally, if you would like to request novels and access my Google Drive where I have 200 plus audiobooks, then you can join my Patreon, link is also provided in the description.
Chapter 41, Tsunade's Astonishing Idea. In the bath, Shishi Hashida closed his eyes, contemplating the mission of being a double agent. As a double agent, the most crucial factor was gaining the trust of both sides. Earning Konoha's trust shouldn't be a problem. After all, he would be a Konoha ninja for a long time, with Minato Namikaze as his mentor and backing, and his loyalty to the village was well established. But how could he gain the daimyo's trust over a long period? Beyond the mission itself, the daimyo's investment in him was quite significant. This could provide an additional source of income, which he could use to his advantage. Should I introduce some geniuses to the daimyo? Like Kakashi? Charging a 3 to 5% introduction fee wouldn't be too much, right? But if that guy Asuma Sarutobi gets recruited by the daimyo, will he blame me? Shishi's thoughts wandered, only coming back to reality after he finished his bath. My current focus is close combat, with a secondary role as a medical ninja. Leaving aside the medical ninja path for now, my close combat skills will definitely center around Ninjutsu in the future. The dance of the crescent moon isn't bad, but it's not enough to make me a Jonin, let alone an elite Jonin. As Shishi got dressed, he continued pondering. Even though he was just a genin now, he had to consider his future path. For instance, how should he progress in Ninjutsu? After mastering the dance of the crescent moon, I should focus on wind release chakra nature transformation, then apply it to Ninjutsu, developing my own ultimate sword technique. As for fire release, it seems like I would either need to pour a lot of chakra into it or combine it with other techniques, like wind release. Given the limits of time and energy, if it weren't for the tag system, Shishi would likely be fully committed to the wind release and Ninjutsu path by now. Once dressed, Shishi headed straight to Konoha Hospital. While practicing the delicate illness extraction technique at the daimyo's residence, he had accumulated a few questions that only Nono Yakushi could help him answer. However, upon arriving at the hospital, he didn't see Nono. Instead, he ran into Tsunade, whom he hadn't seen in a while. Lady Tsunade. Shishi quickly bowed in respect. Kid, are you here to see Nono? Tsunade stopped in her tracks. Shishi nodded, yes, I'm here to study medical ninjutsu. Tsunade nodded and began to walk away, but after taking 2 steps, she stopped and turned back. Hey, have you ever thought about developing your memory palace into a sealing technique? Shishi's eyes lit up at her words. He turned and asked, Lady Tsunade, do you have the same idea? I've already tried it before. I attempted to fix the memory palace in the mind using a curse seal and developed a technique for it. I later consulted with Minato-sensei, and he further refined it. Tsunade frowned slightly upon hearing this, that guy Minato, his sealing techniques aren't bad. She knew about Minato Namikaze, of course Jiraiya's disciple and Uzumaki Kushina's lover, who had learned sealing techniques from Kushina. If that's the case, then it's fine. Tsunade waved her hand and started to walk away. But Shishi quickly stepped forward to stop her. Lady Tsunade, although we have similar ideas, the paths we take might not be the same. It's really necessary to exchange our thoughts, who knows, we might gain even more insights. Tsunade hesitated for a moment, then nodded, all right, let's go to my office. In Tsunade's office, under her watchful gaze, Shishi Hashida carefully replicated the sealing technique that had been refined by Minato Namikaze. Tsunade crossed her arms as she observed, nodding in approval when Shishi finished. This technique is already quite well developed. It turns the memory palace into a genjutsu space, reinforced with a sealing technique, allowing for controlled input and output of memories. So, this sealing technique is specifically designed for certain memories. Shishi gave a thumbs up. As expected of Lady Tsunade. The initial idea was to prevent the mental shock that comes from the memories when a shadow clone is dispelled. Tsunade mused for a moment. Shadow clones? You want to use them for training? Be careful then. Besides the memories, there's also the exhaustion. You could easily overwork yourself to death. But I assume Minato already warned you about this. Shishi nodded, then asked, Lady Tsunade, do you have any thoughts on this? Instead of answering, Tsunade asked, what do you think ninjutsu is? Shishi frowned, thinking for a moment before replying. It's the release of chakra energy in various forms, like wind, fire, lightning, or illusions, and so on. Tsunade nodded. That's a good description. There are many techniques, including curse seals and sealing jutsu, that can be preset on the body and then activated whenever needed. Shishi immediately thought of the Hyga clan's caged bird seal, a sealing technique with both active and passive triggers. Active, meaning the main family can control the seal at will to damage the brain and blind the Byakugan of the branch family members. Passive, meaning that if a branch member dies in battle or is captured and their eyes are taken, the seal will automatically activate, destroying the Byakugan. Another example that stood out to Shishi was Danzo's reverse 4-symbol seal. During his battle with Suzuki Uchiha, Danzo used a binding curse seal that must have been pre-prepared, allowing him to activate it instantly. However, such sealing techniques and curse marks were far from simple, otherwise, they would have been widespread long ago. Shishi considered, Lady Tsunade, are you thinking of using this to seal medical ninjutsu? Tsunade nodded. The original memory palace is just a mnemonic technique that most people can learn. But by transforming it into a sealing technique, turning the memory palace into a genjutsu space, and the sealing space into something like a library, you could store memories as books, or even as people. In the same way, you could store medical ninjutsu using this method, ready to be deployed instantly without the need for hand signs. Shishi was inwardly shocked. Is this really the kind of creativity a native of this world should have? But thinking it over, there were already preset curse marks that could be activated instantly, and even ninjutsu scrolls that stored jutsu, like the one Shikamaru Nara used against Kakuzu. However, Tsunade's idea was clearly more systematic and large-scale. And it involved doing this within a person's brain. After a moment's thought, Shishi responded, Lady Tsunade, simple memory is vastly different from finjutsu, curse seals, or ninjutsu. The original memory palace was a mnemonic system, a technique for associative memory. In simple terms, it linked what needed to be remembered with familiar locations to achieve quick, long-term, or even permanent memory retention. Shishi used the familiar setting of Konoha for his memory palace, which is why he came up with the idea of turning this mnemonic technique into a sealing jutsu. And he had succeeded. But ninjutsu was different from memory. Memory is just a function of consciousness, whereas ninjutsu requires chakra as an energy source. As Shishi had explained to Tsunade earlier, the process of performing ninjutsu, without considering hand signs, involves controlling chakra energy and manipulating its form and nature. I'm aware of that, Tsunade replied, having clearly thought this through before proposing her idea. Shishi smiled. It's certainly an astonishing idea. But solidifying a medical ninjutsu in the brain, aside from the difficulty of doing that, if the seal malfunctions, even a medical jutsu could cause serious harm. Tsunade, however, was nonchalant. What jutsu isn't dangerous? If the memory palace can systematically store memories, it should be possible to store medical ninjutsu in the same way. Take Yin Healing Wound Destruction, for example. You wouldn't need to anticipate the enemy's attacks. Thoughts and nerve signals travel faster than any physical action, so you could activate the jutsu in the instant before the enemy's attack lands. Chapter 42, The Chunin Examination. Shishi Hashida knew that if Tsunade's idea could truly be realized, the benefits would be immense. But how could it be achieved? Shishi pondered, Lady Tsunade, if we want to systematically store medical ninjutsu, then chakra would also need to be sealed along with it. To put it simply, it would involve sealing a jutsu that has already been released, and then releasing it again when needed. As he spoke, he couldn't help but think of the Creation Rebirth S-rank medical ninjutsu from the original series. This technique could regenerate cells rapidly, healing even life-threatening wounds, but it required a massive amount of chakra. Hence the creation of the Strength of 100 seal, which allowed for an instantaneous surge of chakra, increasing the output while maintaining stability and precision. With these two techniques, one was almost invincible. And the Yin seal was a sealing technique specifically designed to store chakra, passed down from the Uzumaki clan. However, it was clear that Tsunade had not yet developed Creation Rebirth or the Strength of 100 seal at this point, otherwise, she wouldn't be considering these ideas now. Of course, it's challenging, Tsunade remarked. If we could pre-store ninjutsu, including the accumulation of chakra, we could heal severe injuries at critical moments. You see, many injuries require a tremendous amount of chakra to heal effectively, but often during treatment, we don't have the capacity to generate such powerful chakra bursts or maintain precise control. As she spoke, a shadow crossed her face, recalling the loss of Dan in front of her. For Shishi, the concept of sealing ninjutsu had already diverged significantly from the memory palace itself. The memory palace technique had merely inspired Tsunade. Even though he wasn't yet proficient in sealing techniques, Shishi understood just how difficult it would be to achieve what Tsunade envisioned. Noticing Tsunade's somber expression, Shishi thought for a moment and said, "Lady Tsunade, your idea is truly remarkable, but I believe we could break it down into steps and tackle it piece by piece. First, we need to develop a sufficiently powerful medical ninjutsu. Yin healing wound destruction is indeed impressive, but many injuries may not heal quickly enough, especially large open wounds or internal organ damage. So, our first priority should be to create a more powerful medical ninjutsu. Second, we'll need a sealing technique to construct a chakra pathway. Medical ninjutsu is different from other types of ninjutsu, it requires greater precision, stability, and a large chakra output. Therefore, a specialized technique must be developed to handle this. Lastly, we need to address the issue of massive chakra reserves. We should devise a method to store chakra that isn't immediately needed and release it when necessary." Tsunade fell into deep thought after hearing this, then looked up at Shishi. "Shishi, your approach does seem more likely to succeed." Finally, she stopped calling him kid. That simple change in address held a lot of significance. Shishi knew that his relationship with Tsunade had taken a step forward. Which made sense, there's no such thing as a free lunch in this world, and he wasn't handsome enough to win people over on looks alone, especially considering he was just a 6-year-old kid. Now that he'd earned her recognition, Shishi immediately smiled and said, "Since Lady Tsunade agrees, let's focus our efforts on these 3 areas. Lady Tsunade, as the greatest medical ninja in the shinobi world, I'm confident you can achieve this." Tsunade's mood lifted, and she hummed in agreement. "Of course. But I'll be the one doing the hard work. As for you, your sealing and medical ninjutsu skills are still lacking." "So harsh." Shishi put on a hurt expression. "Lady Tsunade, are you really just tossing me aside after I've helped you cross the river? My skills may be unremarkable, but you can't deny that my ideas are unrestrained." Feeling a bit guilty, Tsunade waved her hand dismissively. All right. You've definitely contributed a lot. If we succeed in developing this technique, you'll get your share of the credit. And also," she hesitated before adding, "if you need any help with medical ninjutsu, feel free to ask me." Shishi was overjoyed and quickly bowed. "Thank you, Lady Tsunade." Tsunade waved him off and then said thoughtfully, "There's already a sealing technique for storing chakra, the Yin seal, inherited from the Uzumaki clan." Shishi chimed in, "Was it passed down by Lady Mito?" "It was indeed something my grandmother left behind." Tsunade nodded. "Once I've fully mastered it, I'll teach it to you. For now, you can go. I need some quiet time to think about this new technique." Having received this promise, Shishi immediately took his leave to find Nanyakushi. Sigh, the hospital director is still the kindest. That evening, as Shishi Hashida returned to the orphanage with Nanyakushi, he bought 2 chickens on the way. Back at the orphanage, he successfully swapped the eyes of the 2 chickens. The delicate illness extraction technique was perfected. And the chicken soup turned out to be very delicious. For the next 2 days, Shishi rested, spending from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Konoha hospital with Nanyakushi to further familiarize himself with the delicate illness extraction technique. Additionally, he practiced from 5 a.m. each morning, trained with Guy and the others after 4 p.m., and continued to seek medical knowledge from Nanyakushi in the evenings. Unfortunately, Kakashi was absent, so Shishi missed out on a Taijutsu showdown with him. The 2 days passed quickly, and the team resumed their missions. Whether it was escorting a merchant convoy, protecting a noble from the land of fire, border duty, or exchanging intelligence with other ninja villages or organizations, each mission was at least a C rank. Shishi and his team's mission experience was rapidly increasing. Time flew, and it was July before they knew it. On this day, Minato Namikaze did not bring a new mission but rather 3 registration forms. Minato smiled and said, "As your team leader, I've recommended you to participate in the Chunin exam. Finally, we're about to become a Chunin." Kurama Sani was very excited and immediately reached out to take the registration form. Sani, who was handing the form to Shishi, suddenly said, "By the way, if Shishi passes the exam, that means he'll become a Chunin at 6 years old, right?" Minato and Uchiha Shisui both looked at Shishi. Shishi was momentarily stunned. His birthday was March 3rd, so by age calculation, he was indeed still 6 years old. Kakashi's birthday was in September, and he wasn't even 6 yet. So, if Shishi passed, he would be the youngest Chunin, surpassing Kakashi? It was a bit thrilling to think about. But would Kakashi be participating in the Chunin exams this year? As he pondered, the tag tree in his mind started to stir. Shishi didn't check immediately and said, "My birthday is in March, so I'm still 6 years old. If no one younger than me passes the exam, then I would indeed become a Chunin at 6. Minato was confident. "With your abilities, it's definitely not a problem." Among the three, Shishi was the youngest, having graduated less than 6 months ago, but his progress had been rapid, demonstrating full Chunin level strength. Fill out the registration forms and submit them to the Hokage Tower. The first written test will be in 3 days, so make sure not to be late. Minato reminded them. Shishi and his team nodded in unison. Understood. Chapter 43, Sealing Expert. After the team disbanded and returned home, Shishi Hashida immediately checked the newly triggered tag in the tag tree. Tag, Konoha Genius. Condition to obtain, become a Chunin at the age of 6, breaking the record for the youngest Chunin in Konoha. Effect, increases comprehension by 50%. Whoa! An increase in comprehension. This isn't like the Fire Release Expert tag, which only enhances fire release abilities. This boosts overall comprehension across all areas. I have to get this. Shishi's resolve hardened. While the ranks of Genin, Chunin, and Jainin aren't the only indicators of strength, they are certainly based on it. One might possess Chunin level strength but still fail the exam, for example, Uchiha Obito. The first written test shouldn't be a problem. As for the second round, the individual combat, is there anyone participating in the exam who could be stronger than Shisui? Shishi evaluated himself. Over the past 2 months, while his swordsmanship was still slightly behind Uchiha Shisui's, his superior mental processing speed and neural reflexes made him formidable in close combat, whether unarmed or with a sword. Kurama Sani was no longer a match for him. Even against Shisui, when not using the body flicker technique, their sparring sessions were evenly matched. Shisui had the edge in insight and attack speed, but Shishi's reactions were faster. However, quicker reactions don't necessarily mean faster attack speed. Speed in combat also depends on chakra, physical fitness, and technique. Shisui's body flicker and genjutsu were both significant threats to Shishi. In past sparring sessions, Shishi had never been able to counter Shisui's body flicker. He could only rely on his quick reflexes to respond, but ultimately, he would still lose. Of course, in the individual combat round, he likely wouldn't face someone from his own team. But I still need to be wary of genjutsu users among the genin. Shishi thought to himself. He was familiar with genjutsu, having trained with both Shisui and Kurama Sani. His experience in handling genjutsu was extensive. Detecting when he was under a genjutsu and then dispelling it was crucial. However, genjutsu is often hard to guard against. Most of the time, it's difficult to realize you've been caught in a genjutsu right away. If you can't detect it immediately, it could be very dangerous. When facing the Sharingan, dispelling the genjutsu becomes even more challenging, often requiring assistance from others. There's also the paralysis-type genjutsu, where you're fully aware you're under its influence, but you can't control your body. For instance, the demonic illusion, shackling stakes technique Orochimaru was taken down instantly by Uchiha Itachi with this move. Then there's the Sage Art, Frog Song, an auditory-based paralysis genjutsu. The Sharingan. I've gotten used to not making direct eye contact with Shisui during battles, but that doesn't guarantee safety. Not all Sharingan genjutsu require direct eye contact to activate. Shishi couldn't help but think of Dan's. Orochimaru had joined the Anbu, and it wouldn't be surprising if he was already researching wood release. Who knows if Dan's had already transplanted a Sharingan. In the original story, he used Izanagi when he ambushed Shisui. Izanagi is manageable, you might not die the first time, so just kill them a few more times. But Izanami, now that's a particularly troublesome technique, said to counter Izanagi by forcing the user to accept their fate. Isn't that basically forcing someone to accept their death without using Izanagi? Who would want to accept that? Right now, the technique Shishi feared the most was Izanami. Would Dan's master both Izanagi and Izanami? Shishi didn't know but decided it was better to be prepared. Looking at the now cursed Kabuto Yakushi, it wasn't something that could be fixed with a simple "I'm sorry." Under infinite loop scenarios, Kabuto might have been driven mad and forcibly brainwashed. Its effects were comparable to the Tsukuyomi. If Dan's used it, would Shishi have to kneel and pledge his loyalty, becoming a mere tool in his schemes to become Hokage? His thoughts wandered a bit too fast. Shishi quickly refocused on himself. With his powerful neural response speed, basic techniques like fire release, swordsmanship, and physical techniques, unless someone in the Chunin exam was even more monstrous than Uchiha Shisui in him, defeat was unlikely. Team battles were even less of a concern. With 2 members skilled in Genjutsu, combined with his fire release and close combat expertise, their advantage was significant. Finally, Shishi returned to his task, retrieving a scroll. Sealing Technique Memory Palace. Over the past 2 months, he had thoroughly mastered this sealing technique, perfected by Minato Namikaze. Today, he would complete this technique and acquire the Sealing Expert tag. He took a large blank scroll and began drawing the seals. About half an hour later, the seals were completed. Shishi set down his brush and sat cross-legged in the center of the scroll, surrounded by a dense array of drawn seals. He then formed hand seals. 12 seals in total, and once completed, the seals on the scroll activated, resembling tadpoles as they rapidly crawled up Shishi's body, eventually converging at the top of his head and vanishing into his scalp. Memory Palace, achieved. Shishi immediately sensed a new sealing space in his mind. Or rather, a memory space. The Memory Palace was now as described. The structure of the Memory Palace resembled the entire Konoha village. Buildings within the village served as his storage for memories. In addition to the buildings, there were individuals. Kakashi, Might Guy, Asuma Sarutobi, Shizuan, Shisui Uchiha, Obito Uchiha, Kurama Sani, and others. These represented their abilities, habits, battle styles, and more. Looking at his memory palace, Shishi thought, this memory palace is best suited for use in Genjutsu. Yes, Genjutsu. Or rather, a combination of Genjutsu and sealing techniques. However, Shishi hadn't had the chance to delve deeply into Genjutsu yet, it was still just a concept. Shifting his focus from the memory palace, Shishi looked at the tag tree. Activate Sealing Expert. Sealing techniques and seal/cursed related skills increased by 100%, memory enhanced by 100%. Shishi immediately felt a surge in his brain, as if it were electrified, with a brief moment of blankness. Once everything settled, he got up and took another scroll. Sealing Technique Yin Seal. This was the technique Tsunade had given him 2 days ago. Undoubtedly, this technique was far more complex than the memory palace he had just used. Previously, he had only schemed through it and found it quite challenging, deciding to postpone further research until he had accumulated more knowledge in sealing techniques. Now, however, he felt differently. Seems, it's not particularly difficult. And indeed, I've gained a photographic memory. Shishi smiled. Without a cheat, he had been praised by Minato Namikaze for his talent in sealing techniques. Now with a 100% increase, he wondered if he could compare to Minato, Tsunade, and the others. It looks like I need to seek their advice on sealing techniques more often. Stowing the scroll, Shishi formed hand seals. Boom! A shadow clone was created and nodded to the original before leaving. This shadow clone was to practice wind release chakra nature transformation. Given his chakra, one shadow clone was ideal for sustained training. Chapter 44, Training with Tsunade. After sending out a shadow clone to train in wind release chakra nature transformation, Shishi Hashida headed to the Konoha hospital to continue his training under Yakushi Nan. Even with the Chunin exam approaching, his training schedule remained unaffected. 3 days passed in a flash. On the morning of July 6, year 39 of Konoha, the first written test of the Chunin exam began at 9 a.m. Before heading out, Shishi still made time to create a shadow clone for training. He entered the exam hall with Shisui Uchiha and Kurama Sani, but even as the exam started, there was no sign of Kakashi. It was clear that Kakashi wasn't participating in this Chunin exam. Setting aside his thoughts, Shishi focused on the test. 10 minutes later, both he and Shisui submitted their papers simultaneously. As they left the classroom, the two exchanged smiles. Shisui said, "Let's wait for Sani, and then we can train together afterward." Shishi nodded, "That's exactly what I was thinking." While waiting, Shishi took the opportunity to ask Shisui for advice on Genjutsu. Shisui, of course, answered all his questions but couldn't help but be curious. "Are you planning to develop your skills in Genjutsu, Shishi?" Shishi smiled, "When it comes to countering Genjutsu, I think the best method is also Genjutsu. 20 minutes later, Kurama-sani emerged from the exam hall. The three then headed to their training ground. They practiced individual combat and team battle tactics until noon, when they parted ways. For lunch, Shishi joined Yakushi-nan at the Konoha hospital. The test this morning was no problem for you, right, Shishi? Nan, who wore glasses, gently placed her beef onto Shishi's plate. Shishi ate it in one big bite, smiling, of course not. Tomorrow and the day after won't be an issue either. Director, I've almost mastered the delicate illness extraction technique. Can I start learning another medical ninjutsu? With his high level of concentration, he had a significant advantage in medical ninjutsu. Even a 100% focus is hard for most people to maintain for long periods, but Shishi could do it as long as his physical and mental stamina held out. Nan listened with a mix of fondness and mild exasperation. Shishi, you're usually so steady, but sometimes you're too impatient. Even though you've grasped this technique, there's still plenty of room for improvement. Shishi couldn't help but feel a bit frustrated. The medical expert tag required him to master at least 5 medical ninjutsu, all at C rank or higher. And apart from the basic healing technique, which is C rank, none of the others are simple. Mystical palm technique is A rank, delicate illness extraction technique is B rank, yin healing wound destruction is A rank, and chakra scalpel is A rank. He had to practice on countless small animals before he could master the mystical palm technique and the delicate illness extraction technique. Without his high concentration, quick reflexes, and strong memory, it would have taken him several times longer to master these techniques. And even now, he was only proficient, not yet at the level of mastery. But being proficient was enough for now. Once he earned the medical expert tag, his talent would increase, making further improvement much faster. What might take an average person years to learn could take a genius only a month. Though Nan voiced some complaints, she added, you can start learning yin healing wound destruction next. Thank you, Director. Shishi leaned over and gave Nan a quick peck on the cheek. A 6-year-old kid acting cute, totally reasonable, right? Yakushi-nan didn't mind getting a bit greasy from the kiss. She smiled gently and said, I hope Shishi can come back safely from every mission. Shishi Hashida confidently reassured her, don't worry, I wouldn't leave you behind, Director. On the other side of the room, Tsunade, who was also eating, observed the scene and couldn't help but smirk. What a sly little fox. This kid acted completely differently in front of Yakushi-nan compared to how he behaved around her. In the afternoon, Shishi Hashida officially began training in yin healing wound destruction. This medical ninjutsu is crucial for predicting where the enemy will strike and gathering chakra at that spot before the attack lands. Once hit, the jutsu activates and heals the wound instantly. Unquestionably, having quick reflexes is a significant advantage. In complex battle situations, if an attack is too difficult for Shishi to fully avoid or block, his fast reflexes help him predict the strike point. So, despite being an A-rank medical ninjutsu, the difficulty of mastering it might actually be less than that of the delicate illness extraction technique. Of course, this is all relative. To become proficient in this jutsu, he needed a training partner to act as the attacker. That afternoon, Yakushi-nan created a shadow clone to spar with Shishi at the training ground beside Konoha Hospital. But at some point, Tsunade appeared at the edge of the training ground. Nan, let me take over. Your attacks aren't challenging enough for him. Tsunade's sudden voice interrupted their training. Seeing Tsunade, Shishi suddenly had a bad feeling. Yakushi-nan, however, was delighted. She quickly bowed in gratitude, thank you, Lady Tsunade. Shishi, go ahead and thank Lady Tsunade. Shishi bowed, thank you, Lady Tsunade. Looking at the well-behaved Shishi, Tsunade smiled, don't worry, I'll train him well. Then I'll leave him in your care. Yakushi-nan bowed again before releasing her shadow clone. Tsunade lowered her arms from her chest and gave Shishi a smirk, ready. Shishi could feel the intense pressure and immediately shifted into 100% focus mode. Ready. Whoosh. In a flash, Tsunade was in front of Shishi, flicking her finger straight at his forehead. So fast. Aside from Minato Namikaze and that one elite Jainin he met at the daimyo's estate, Shishi hadn't encountered anyone with such speed since graduating. Luckily, his reflexes were sharp enough for him to lean his head back and avoid the flick. But Tsunade's hand quickly changed course, aiming to grab Shishi by the neck. Shishi immediately stepped back. Quick reflexes. Tsunade huffed. Letting a little brat dodge her attack was a bit frustrating. She struck with a kick. A punch. The ground exploded, leaving deep craters all over the training ground. Shishi dodged with all his might, and when he finally managed to distance himself, he couldn't help but gulp at the sight of the craters. If he got hit, could his small body take it? Not even 30 yet and already going through early menopause. Shishi couldn't help but grumble to himself. Across from him, Tsunade shouted, "Don't forget the purpose of your training." This kid's reflexes were incredibly fast, almost on par with some Jainin. Tsunade was secretly impressed, then launched another quick attack using the body flicker technique. As Shishi dodged, he replied, "Lady Tsunade, of course, I haven't forgotten the purpose of the training. If you're not forced into a corner, yin healing wound destruction is pointless." Tsunade grunted, "Then get ready." It seemed she needed to take this more seriously. Tsunade immediately increased the frequency of her attacks, while also holding back on her strength to conserve energy. Chapter 45, One Move. Around 4 p.m., Shishi Hashida limped away from the training ground beside Konoha Hospital, grimacing in pain. "It hurts. It hurts so much." He had taken more than a dozen hits from Tsunade. That woman could really hit hard, and she was downright ruthless. She waited until his mental and physical stamina were drained, his reactions slowed, and then she went all out on him. Aside from his face, he had bruises and welts all over his body. "When I grow up, I'll definitely get even." Shishi vowed silently as he popped a soldier pill into his mouth. Back at the training ground, Tsunade watched Shishi limp away and couldn't help but smile, feeling completely refreshed. Beating someone up is actually pretty satisfying. But was I too harsh? No way. I'm helping this brat with his training. Tsunade muttered to herself, then decided, we'll continue tomorrow. By the time Shishi arrived at his usual training spot near the Ninja Academy, most of the bruises and welts on his body had already faded. This was thanks to a combination of medical ninjutsu and his own enhanced recovery abilities from the tags he unlocked. "Hey, Kakashi!" Shishi spotted Kakashi standing on the edge of a cliff, gazing at the sun as it slowly sank toward the western horizon. He immediately walked over. "Kakashi, why didn't you sign up for the Chunin exams?" Shishi asked as he sat down beside him. Without turning his head, Kakashi replied, "Our squad leader, Akiyama-sensei, thinks we've only just graduated, so he didn't recommend us." Sarutobi Akiyama, a Jainin from the Sarutobi clan and Kakashi's team leader. Shishi had met him a couple of times before. "Well, since we can't face off during the exams, how about we have a Taijutsu match right now, Kakashi?" Shishi suggested with a grin. Before today, he had already beaten Kakashi in Taijutsu 12 times. Kakashi turned to him, "Instead of just Taijutsu, I'd prefer a full-scale match." Shishi chuckled, "Of course, but let's warm up with a Taijutsu match first. Then let's not waste any time. Let's begin." With that, Kakashi leaped up, and the fight began. With his superior strength, stamina, battle experience, and quicker reflexes, Shishi easily won the Taijutsu match again. After recovering their strength, the two started a second battle. This time, there were no restrictions, everything was allowed. Taijutsu, Kenjutsu, Ninjutsu, Genjutsu. Kakashi used every technique he had, but he still found himself at a disadvantage. Shishi's Kenjutsu has improved so much since last time. As their swords clashed repeatedly, Kakashi's relentless attacks were completely countered by Shishi. Every counterattack from Shishi disrupted Kakashi's rhythm, putting him in dangerous situations. Just over a month ago, when Kakashi had been Shishi's sparring partner, Shishi's Kenjutsu hadn't been nearly this advanced. The amount of progress he'd made in just 1 month was incredible. Suddenly, Shishi Hashida retreated a short distance and then raised one hand, creating 2 shadow clones. The 3 Shishis then simultaneously attacked Kakashi from 3 different directions. Shadow clones, Konoha-style Kenjutsu, secret technique, dance of the crescent moon. As Kakashi watched the 3 Shishis charge at him, he quickly assessed the situation, immediately pulling out a kunai with his left hand. But Shishi's speed was too fast, Kakashi didn't have time to use shadow clones to distribute the attacks. Clang! Kakashi managed to block the attacks coming from the left and right, but the Shishi attacking from the center effortlessly avoided his kick and placed his blade against Kakashi's neck. The battle was over. As they sheathed their weapons and sat down to rest, Kakashi couldn't help but remark, "Your Kenjutsu has improved so quickly." Shishi shook his head, it's because my reactions are faster, and I'm quicker overall. Pure Kenjutsu skill-wise, I'm still behind you. His Kenjutsu had indeed improved rapidly, largely thanks to the Ninjutsu Expert tag, which enhanced his talent with ninja tools, and swords were a type of ninja tool. However, he hadn't surpassed Kakashi in just a few months, it was primarily due to his focus and faster neural responses. But Kakashi countered, speed is part of Kenjutsu too. Hearing this, Shishi didn't offer any further reassurances. Instead, he said, I've heard that the Cloud Ninja have a lightning release secret technique that activates their muscles and nerves, making them faster and improving their reaction time. I wonder if we have such a secret technique in Konoha. Kakashi pondered this for a moment. Shishi then smiled and said, Kakashi, I've thought of a relatively safe way to train our speed and reaction time. Kakashi quickly asked, what method? You'll find out soon. With that, Shishi descended from the cliff. At that moment, Shizuan, Guy, and the others arrived. Shishi greeted them with a smile, perfect timing. The more people, the better this will work. Soon, Shishi led Shizuan and the others to the riverbank, where they started rolling mud balls. After everyone had made a dozen or so mud balls, Shishi finally explained, from now on, these mud balls are shuriken and kunao. Kakashi, your task is to dodge the mud ball attacks. Everyone immediately understood. Sarutobi Asuma commented, it's actually a great training method. Using mud balls instead of kunao and shuriken reduces the danger of training. Shizuan and the others nodded in agreement. This training method was actually quite common. For example, Minato Namikaze had set up traps in the forest to ambush Shishi and the others with shuriken and other hidden weapons. One of the goals was to train their speed and reaction time. Now, Shishi was simply replacing the kunao and shuriken with mud balls and the traps with people. And so, the mud ball training began. Starting with Kakashi, Shizuan, Kurane, and Guy all took turns dodging the mud ball attacks, getting splattered with mud spots, while laughter echoed in the setting sun. The next day, at 9 a.m., in the indoor examination hall, the genin participating in the Chunin exams gathered together, a total of 36 people. At 9:10, the second round officially began. After watching 4 matches in a row, Shishi had a good grasp of the situation. Most of the genin relied primarily on Taijutsu, with ninjutsu being used only at critical moments. Of course, anyone who made it to the exams wasn't weak, but compared to Uchiha Shisui, they still had a long way to go. In the 6th match, Uchiha Shisui took the stage. His opponent was a genin from the Sarutobi clan, whom Shisui defeated effortlessly. In the 10th match, Kurama Sani stepped up but had bad luck, his opponent was a genin from the Hyuga clan, and he lost. In the 11th match, the examiner announced, Shishi Hashida vs Ijin Uchiha. An Uchiha. Shishi was slightly surprised, but then he heard Shisui and Sani cheering him on. Nodding to them, Shishi stepped into the arena. Across from him stood a boy about 10 years old, carrying a sword on his back. The examiner glanced at both of them and then retreated, begin. Shishi immediately raised one hand and created 2 shadow clones, then all 3 of them drew their swords and charged at full speed. So fast. Ijin Uchiha was startled, his initial disdain vanishing instantly. His black eyes quickly turned crimson, revealing the Sharingan, and he swiftly threw 3 shuriken with his left hand. Shishi easily deflected them. But Ijin soon realized he couldn't use his Sharingan to cast Genjutsu, as Shishi had avoided making eye contact with him the entire time. This guy learned that from Shisui. Ijin was furious, but before he could react, Shishi's attack was upon him. Clang! Ijin blocked 2 of Shishi's strikes with his sword and kunao, but he couldn't stop Shishi's real body, and could only watch as the sword was placed against his neck. Defeated in 1 move. The examiner immediately announced, Shishi Hashida wins. As the shadow clones dissipated, Shishi sheathed his sword. Ijin Uchiha snorted, glancing at Shisui in the stands before leaving with a scowl. Being defeated by a kid so much younger than himself in a single move was utterly humiliating. Chapter 46, Not Wearing Anything? In a room within the examination venue, Minato Namikaze and Hiruzen Sarutobi watched Shishi Hashida and Ijin Uchiha's battle through the surveillance screen. To be able to fully execute the dance of the crescent moon in such a short time, it seems that Shishi has quite a talent for Kenjutsu, Hiruzen Sarutobi praised. Minato Namikaze nodded with a smile, yes, 3rd Hokage-sama. Shishi has indeed made great progress in Kenjutsu, and his natural reflexes give him a significant advantage in close combat. Hiruzen Sarutobi added, if he also has sensitivity to sensory and spatial techniques, he could be an ideal candidate for learning the Flying Thunder God technique. Minato nodded again, indeed, I've considered that as well, but it's still too early for Shishi at the moment. Although Shishi's chakra reserves had recently seen a significant increase, they were still not at the level required to practice the Flying Thunder God technique. After the second round of exams, Shishi and his teammates continued their training. At noon, Shishi returned to Konoha Hospital to have lunch with Yakushi Nono. In the afternoon, it was time to endure another round of Tsunade's brutal training. Seeing the exhausted Shishi panting heavily, Tsunade teased him with a mischievous grin, "Hey, kid, are you done for? Woman, you've picked the wrong person to mess with." Shishi gritted his teeth in frustration, pulling out a soldier pill and swallowing it. Feeling his energy quickly returning, Shishi took a deep breath and launched himself at Tsunade with the speed of a rabbit. Finally taking the initiative. Tsunade raised an eyebrow, not particularly concerned. But in the next moment, she was caught off guard as Shishi unleashed the fireball jutsu without forming any hand seals. A fireball came rushing at her, and Tsunade quickly leaped back to dodge it. "Seems like I haven't gathered enough intel on you." "Of course, Lady Tsunade, there's a lot about me that's worth exploring. Now it's my turn to attack." In real combat, you can't always be on the defensive, constantly thinking about how to prepare medical ninjutsu in advance. As Shishi spoke, he leaped into the air, spitting out a barrage of fireballs that engulfed Tsunade. Fire release, Phoenix Sage Fire Technique. Boom! 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 Tsunade dodged repeatedly, but in the chaos, she lost sight of Shishi. "He's behind me." Tsunade turned in midair and threw a punch, but it hit nothing but air. Not good. She realized something was wrong behind her, but it was too late. Shishi had wrapped his legs around Tsunade's waist, his arms encircling her, locking her arms in place. His hands inadvertently landed on her prominent chest. Tsunade's body immediately stiffened, and Shishi seized the opportunity to twist her body, flipping her upside down as they plummeted toward the ground at high speed. Ha! Tsunade's chakra flared as she forcefully broke free from Shishi's grip. As she hit the ground, she used her hands to push herself back onto her feet, lunging at Shishi with a rapid series of punches. Bam! 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 Shishi raised his arms to block, but Tsunade's strength was overwhelming. After just a few punches, his defenses started to falter, his arms growing numb, leaving an opening. Tsunade took advantage of the moment and landed a punch squarely on his abdomen. Fortunately, Shishi had anticipated this and used the Yin Healing Wound Destruction technique, although he wasn't very skilled at it. The impact bent him like a shrimp, and Tsunade followed up with another punch, this time striking his cheek, and then a powerful uppercut aimed at his chin. 200% focus. His mind raced. Shishi Hashira pushed everything else out of his mind, twisting his body to avoid the blow, and kicked Tsunade in the chest, using the rebound to propel himself away. Flipping in midair, Shishi launched a fireball straight at Tsunade's face. The distance was short, and the speed was fast. Tsunade couldn't dodge in time. Chakra flared around her arms as she crossed them in front of her to shield herself. Boom! The explosion sent Tsunade flying, flipping several times before landing. Her bare arms were covered in burns, but they began healing rapidly, clearly the result of the Yin Healing Wound Destruction technique. This kid, he didn't even need hand seals for that fire release. Panting heavily, Tsunade glared at Shishi, who was also gasping for breath across from her. Her chest heaved as she caught her breath, clearly winded. Shishi's left cheek was already swollen. He had managed to use the Yin Healing Wound Destruction on his abdomen after taking that punch, but there hadn't been time to do the same for his face. Luckily, Tsunade had held back. If she hadn't, that punch would have left his head ringing, making it impossible for him to concentrate enough to use any jutsu. Just like when Shisui Uchiha was ambushed by Danzo with Izanagi taking several hits to the head before he could even react, leading to his eyes being stolen. Shishi popped another soldier pill, formed hand seals, and used a healing technique to reduce the swelling on his face before walking over to Tsunade. "Lady Tsunade, we agreed no hitting the face." Tsunade blushed, remembering that she had indeed promised, but she quickly huffed and defended herself. In a real fight, any part of the body is a target. Especially the head. It's the easiest way to disrupt an enemy's thinking and attack capabilities. Shishi had no response to that. He then glanced at the two footprints on Tsunade's chest and pointed at them. Tsunade looked down, then casually brushed off the dust, causing a noticeable jiggle. Shishi kept his gaze straight ahead, not daring to look. That's enough for today. Tsunade concluded the day's training, saying, your reactions are quick, but your techniques still need more refinement. We'll continue tomorrow. She had nearly been bested by a mere genin today. It was a sign that she needed to get back into training herself. Her speed and reaction time had clearly declined from lack of practice. As Tsunade walked away, Shishi couldn't help but reflect on what had just happened. It seemed, she wasn't wearing anything. His hand twitched instinctively, but Shishi quickly suppressed the urge. Pervert. Such a pervert. Shishi shook off the thought and left the training ground to find Kakashi. With no missions to distract him, he needed to get as many sparring matches in with Kakashi as possible. The sooner he could unlock the Taijutsu Expert tag, the sooner he could further enhance his physical abilities. Physical strength is the foundation of everything. Before sunset, Shishi had not only scored another Taijutsu victory over Kakashi, but he had also made progress toward unlocking the Ninjutsu Expert tag. However, his victories weren't due to superior swordsmanship or Ninjutsu techniques, but rather his exceptional reaction speed. But a win is a win, and the tag system recognized it as such. Now, all Shishi needed was to fully master the dance of the crescent moon, and he would unlock the Ninjutsu Expert tag. On July 8, in the 39th year of Konoha, at 10 a.m. the third round of the Chunin exams began, with Shishi's team facing off against another squad. By sheer coincidence, the opposing team included Ijin Uchiha, who had lost to Shishi in the second round. While they weren't exactly enemies, Ijin glared at Shishi and Shisui Uchiha with intense hatred. I'll take care of Shisui Uchiha and that Kurama-sani. You two need to be cautious of Shishi Hashida, he's incredibly fast. Ijin warned his two teammates. They both nodded in agreement. Don't worry. They had watched Shishi's battle with Ijin yesterday and knew just how strong he was. On the other side, Shisui said, I'll handle Ijin. Shishi and Kurama-sani had no objections. Sharingan against Sharingan, it couldn't be more fitting. Chapter 47, Konoha's youngest Chunin. In the forest where the third exam was taking place, the two teams stood about 10 meters apart, facing each other. The proctor glanced at the two prepared teams and then stepped back. Begin. At the sound of the command, both sides launched their attacks simultaneously. Shishi Hashida pretended to form two hand seals and immediately unleashed a barrage of fireballs from his mouth, covering everyone in flames. Fire release, Phoenix Sage Fire Technique. The speed at which he released the jutsu caught Ijin Uchiha and his team off guard. They had assumed that Shishi was solely focused on close combat. Their formation was instantly disrupted, forcing all three to dodge in different directions. Taking advantage of the distraction, Kurama-sani quickly cast a genjutsu that ensnared everyone except Ijin. However, with an Uchiha on their team, his teammates were well versed in handling genjutsu, even if they weren't experts themselves. In the blink of an eye, they broke free from the genjutsu and charged at Kurama-sani. 3 against 1 in close combat, Kurama-sani was swiftly kicked away. But by then, Shishi had already completed his preparations for the dance of the crescent moon. He drew his sword and dashed forward 3 against 2. In a flash, two figures were sent flying and collapsed unconscious without a sound. Having dealt with their opponents, Shishi and Kurama-sani turned to the other side of the battlefield. Uchiha Shisui and Ijin Uchiha were locked in a fierce duel, their weapons clashing with sparks flying everywhere. Seeing that Shishi and Kurama had defeated their opponents, a smile appeared in Shisui's eyes. Looks like I need to hurry up. Seizing the moment, Shisui stepped back, sheathed his sword, and then formed hand seals, body flicker technique. His body split into multiple images as he began circling Ijin Uchiha at high speed, creating more and more after images. Shadow clones. Ijin threw shuriken to test, only to find they passed through the images. After images? Genjutsu. Suddenly, several Shisuis attacked at once. Clang, clang, clang. Ijin swung his long sword and kunai to fend them off, shocked at the realization. They're all solid attacks. Before he could unravel the technique, Shisui appeared behind him and struck him unconscious with a swift chop. Done. Mission complete. The proctor announced, Minato's team wins. Outside the exam area, Minato Namikaze watched as Shishi Hashida and his teammates walked out. He smiled and said, Well done. Lunch is on me, a little early celebration. The four of them left in high spirits, while the other teams continued their battles. That afternoon, instead of heading to train with Tsunade after lunch, Shishi stayed with Minato and the others, waiting in front of the Hokage building for the Chunin exam results. It happened to be the weekend, so people like Shizuan, Gai, Kurane, and Asuma were also gathered there, waiting for the news. At 3 p.m., the list of newly promoted Chunin was posted. As expected, Shishi Hashida, Shisui Uchiha, and Kurama Sani were on the list. In total, only 5 people had been promoted to Chunin. Shishi, you're now the youngest Chunin in Konoha. Kurama Sani exclaimed excitedly, looking at the names on the list. This statement immediately caught the attention of those around them. The youngest. Shishi Hashida, he just graduated this year. Wait, I remember a guy who graduated at 5, could it be him? No, the 5-year-old graduate is the son of the White Fang. The chatter around them grew louder, and Kurama Sani, proud of the attention, added, Shishi isn't even 7 yet. Amazing. Becoming a Chunin before 7. How did he manage that? I saw his match yesterday, his speed is incredible. He took down his opponent in one move, and it was against an Uchiha who had activated his Sharingan. As the discussions grew, many of the female ninjas gathered there looked at Shishi with sparkling eyes. Feeling a bit overwhelmed, Shishi quickly pulled Kurama Sani along and headed into the Hokage building. 10 minutes later. After receiving their Chunin vests, Shishi and his teammates exited the Hokage building and said their goodbyes to Minato. Shishi then walked over to where Shizuan and the others were waiting. Congratulations on your promotion to Chunin, Shishi. The youngest Chunin maybe even in the entire ninja world. You're incredible, Shishi. Truly amazing. Everyone around him chimed in with their congratulations. Just as expected from Shishi, he's always so popular wherever he goes. Kurama Sani looked at Shishi Hashida with admiration. Shisui Uchiha smiled, outstanding people always attract attention. Minato Namikaze, however, noticed Shizuan beside Shishi and couldn't help but think of Kushina Uzumaki. He smiled and said, Shisui and Sani must also have girls who like them, right? Kurama Sani blushed and immediately ran away. Shisui Uchiha remained calm and composed, I don't have a girl I like at the moment, but it seems that Minato-sensei already does and is quite eager about it. Minato Namikaze, slightly embarrassed, chuckled, since you already know, I'll leave you to it. He patted Shisui on the shoulder and vanished. After arranging to practice with Shizuan and the others at 5 p.m., Shishi headed toward Konoha Hospital. He had made plans with Tsunade to continue their training today. But just a few steps out, Shishi saw a figure smiling warmly as she waited for him. Sister Tenka. Shishi hurried over. Congratulations on your promotion to Chunin, Shishi, and becoming the youngest Chunin in Konoha's history. Tenka, with a radiant smile, slightly bent down and handed over the prepared gift. Thank you. Shishi expressed his gratitude as he took the gift with both hands. A jutsu scroll? Shishi didn't open it immediately. He chatted with Tenka as they walked, and only when they reached Konoha Hospital did Tenka give Shishi a hug and turn to leave. As Shishi watched Tenka leave and was about to turn around, he heard a voice, it seems your charm with women is quite impressive. Turning around, Shishi calmly replied, if Tsunade-sama didn't hit me, that statement would be more convincing. Tsunade smirked and said sternly, that won't do. Training must be taken seriously. Shishi couldn't help but roll his eyes. Tsunade's smile grew a bit warmer as she waved her hand, let's get started. The real training began. About an hour later, Shishi lay exhausted on the ground. Not far away, Tsunade was leaning on her thighs, panting heavily, sweat pouring down her forehead. This kid is really something. Exceptional reaction speed, high concentration, and faster recovery than ordinary people. He's truly a natural-born ninja. Catching her breath, Tsunade stepped forward, hey, can you still continue? Lying on the ground, Shishi couldn't help but roll his eyes. He had already consumed 2 soldier pills. Lady Tsunade, I'm not even 7 years old yet. T/N, totally child abuse, should I call the FBI here? Shishi emphasized. Tsunade snorted, on the battlefield, enemies won't care if you're not yet 7. T/N, in bedroom, people do care woman. Her expression softened as she said, well, that's it for today. Oh, and congratulations on becoming a Chunin, the youngest Chunin since Konoha was established. Shishi got up from the ground and extended his hand to Tsunade. Tsunade paused for a moment. Shishi said, "Shouldn't Lady Tsunade have prepared a congratulatory gift?" Tsunade's face darkened, "Let's talk about that when you become a Jainin." With that, she turned and walked away, her high heels clicking as she went. Chapter 48, Let's Dance. Tag, Konoha Genius. Condition to obtain, become a Chunin at the age of 6, breaking the record for the youngest Chunin in Konoha's history. Effect, increases comprehension by 50%. Before training with Tsunade, Shishi Hashida quietly activated this tag. During the training, he genuinely felt the impact of the talent enhancement. Even a 50% increase made a noticeable difference compared to the previous day. A 50% overall improvement means that my talent in using ninja tools, fire release, and sealing techniques has also increased by 50% on top of what they were before. If his fire release talent initially had a base value of 1, then after acquiring the fire release expert tag, it became 2. Now, it's 2 plus 1, totaling 3. This also applies to his talent in sealing and curse techniques. Since his starting point in these areas was already higher than in fire release, the percentage increase would be even greater. I'll try out some sealing techniques tonight. As he pondered, Shishi packed his bag and headed to meet up with Shizuan and the others. When he arrived, he saw that they were already training, with Asuma Sarutobi being the one under siege. However, this time, they weren't using mud balls but completely reusable clay. Noticing Shishi's arrival, the group paused, and Shizuan explained, this was Asuma's idea. It's better for simulating various ninja tools. Shishi's eyes lit up, that's an interesting idea. Might Guy suggested, if we all compete together, I think it'll be even more exciting and fun. Let's do it. Shishi said with a mischievous glint in his eye as he looked at Kakashi. For example, if Kakashi loses, he should take off his mask and let everyone see his real face. In an instant, everyone's gaze locked onto Kakashi's face. Shizuan immediately raised her hand, I agree with Shishi. Rin Nohara also quietly supported the idea, she wanted to see too. The others quickly followed suit, raising their hands in agreement. Kakashi was full of resignation. Although he wanted to refuse, he was outnumbered by the majority on Shishi's side. Then, Obito Uchiha jumped in, Kakashi, I'll compete with you. Kakashi responded coolly, you're not my match. Obito huffed, don't underestimate me, Kakashi. I'm an Uchiha. Kakashi shot back, talk to me when you unlock your Sharingan. Seeing the two of them bickering, Shishi quickly took control of the situation, alright, it's decided then Kakashi versus Obito. Within the set time, whoever gets hit by the clay the most loses. If Kakashi loses, he takes off his mask. If Obito loses. Shishi paused, then smiled mischievously, Obito has to dance in front of everyone. Obito froze, dance. Realizing what he agreed to, Obito quickly shouted, I don't know how to dance. Shishi grinned wickedly, no problem, just dance however you like. Unless you think you can't beat Kakashi. Obito fell right into the trap and agreed, albeit reluctantly. The group then moved into the forest, with Shishi acting as the referee to count the number of times Kakashi and Obito were hit by the clay. At the moment, he was the only one with the ability to do so. Meanwhile, Shizuan, Asuma, Kurane, Guy, and Rin took on the task of throwing the clay, using it like shuriken and kunao aimed at Kakashi and Obito. Once everything was set, the competition began with Kakashi. In the forest. Silhouette started through the forest, leaping from branch to branch while occasionally hurling clay at Kakashi. Kakashi, with a short sword in one hand and a kunao in the other, either dodged the projectiles or sliced them cleanly in half. After 5 minutes, everyone came to a halt, and Shishi Hashida announced the results, 5 hits. Kakashi, it seems you're not that great after all. Obito Uchiha said confidently. Now, it's my turn to show you what I've got. The group collected the clay, reshaped it into balls, and began targeting Obito Uchiha. Another 5 minutes passed, and Obito emerged from the forest, head hung low. He had been hit a total of 10 times. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Obito hesitantly started dancing, prompting bursts of laughter from the group. Frustrated, Obito shut his eyes and danced wildly, as if to get it over with. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw Rin Nohara standing nearby, smiling at him. Immediately, Obito's mood lifted, and he grinned back at her. Watching this joyful scene, Shishi Hashida couldn't help but regret not bringing a camera. Scenes like this would surely become cherished memories in the future. Later that evening, in his study, Shishi Hashida focused intently on researching the yin seal, a complex sealing technique. Compared to before, he found the learning process much easier. Talent and comprehension really do matter. The gap between people can sometimes be as vast as the gap between humans and pigs, especially when it comes to intelligence. Before he knew it, the clock struck 10. Shishi rolled up the scroll he had been studying and was about to go to bed when he remembered the gift from Tenka. He quickly retrieved it from his bag. Unrolling the scroll, Shishi was pleasantly surprised. It's a storage scroll. It was a specialized sealing scroll designed to store items. Looks like I'll only need to carry this scroll for future missions. Shishi tested it out by sealing his backpack into the scroll and was quite satisfied with the results. The scroll was just the right size to strap to his back. After tidying up, Shishi got into bed. He used to stay up until midnight, but after being under the care of Nanyakushi, who insisted on a 10 p.m. bedtime, his habits had changed during his stay at the orphanage. The next day, a new mission arrived, and this time, it was to the land of bears, with a route that passed through the land of rain and the land of birds. After bidding farewell to Nanyakushi and Tenka, Shishi headed to the village gates to meet up with his team, and they set off for the daimyo's palace. The mission was to escort the daimyo's envoy to the land of bears. They arrived at the palace by noon, but they didn't set out for the land of bears that day. After wandering around the bustling palace town, Shishi returned to the inn and sought out Minato Namikaze to learn more about sealing techniques. Meanwhile, Shisui Uchiha and Sani Kurama discussed genjutsu. The afternoon flew by, and when it was time for dinner, Minato couldn't help but remark, "Shishi, your talent for sealing techniques is even better than I initially thought." It's probably on par with his. Shishi put away his filled notebook and smiled, "That's because you're a great teacher, Minato-sensei." Minato laughed happily, then stood up, "All right, let's go eat." After dinner, the team of four strolled through the night market in the palace town before heading back to the inn. Shishi first sparred with Shisui in Kenjutsu, then continued his study of sealing techniques under Minato's guidance. By 10 p.m., he was ready to rest. Seeing Shishi go to bed, Sani Kurama let out a long sigh of relief. Although he was already accustomed to Shishi's discipline and intense regimen, it still put pressure on him. Especially since Shishi's talents were truly remarkable. Taijutsu, Kenjutsu, fire release, sealing techniques. Would genjutsu be next? Shisui Uchiha patted Sani Kurama on the shoulder and smiled, "That's what it means to be a genius." He, too, felt the pressure but found it more motivating than anything else. Sani Kurama just rolled his eyes, "Shisui, you're a genius too." Chapter 49, Taking Charge. On July 9, year 39 of Konoha, at 9 a.m., the team departed from the daimyo's residence. However, their pace was painfully slow. Shishi Hashida glanced back at the leisurely moving palanquin and the 6 samurai accompanying it, feeling slightly uncomfortable with the situation. How long would it take to reach the land of bears and return at this pace? A month? 2 months? As expected, after a leisurely 3-day journey, the team finally reached the border of the land of fire. Before entering the land of rain, Minato Namikaze gave a reminder, "Once we enter the land of rain, stay alert. Shisui, you take the front, Shishi, you cover the left, Sani, you handle the right, and I'll stay in the center." The three of them nodded in unison. On July 12, at 9 a.m., the team officially entered the land of rain. The 6 samurai accompanying the diplomatic mission stayed with the palanquin, while Shishi Hashida and the others spread out, with Minato managing the central command. Of course, Minato Namikaze was also in charge because he is a sensory ninja. Every so often, he would sense the surroundings, covering a much larger area than Shishi and the others could. It started raining. Shishi Hashida looked up as raindrops fell on his face. At first, they were just light and scattered, but soon they formed a continuous stream, obscuring his vision. As per the plan, Shishi immediately closed the distance with the rest of the team. After another hour of walking, the rain intensified, forcing the group to halt. It wasn't until around 2 p.m., when the rain finally stopped, that the team resumed their journey. Shishi continued to guard the left side. Although he wore a raincoat, the dampness seeping through made him uncomfortable. "What terrible weather! Looks like it's going to rain again," Shishi muttered as he glanced up at the gloomy sky, which seemed ready to burst open. Sure enough, half an hour later, the rain started pouring again. The team narrowed their defensive perimeter once more, but suddenly, Shishi halted, his eyes narrowing as he stared through the wind and rain, catching a fleeting glimpse of a shadow. Trouble's coming. Shishi quickly formed a hand seal, creating a shadow clone to report to Minato. Seeing Shishi's shadow clone, Minato immediately placed his fingers on the ground, closing his eyes to sense the area. Watching Minato's pose, Shishi couldn't help but feel a pang of envy. It looked so cool. 1, 2. 8 in total. 2 teams. They don't seem to be planning an attack, just watching, perhaps. After sensing the area, Minato stood up and said, Shishi, please inform Shisui and Sani to stay vigilant. If the enemy doesn't attack, there's no need to engage them. Understood. Shishi nodded and turned to relay the message to Uchiha Shisui and Kurama Sani. The tension continued throughout the night as they entered a small town. Even though they were exhausted, Shishi and the others remained on high alert. After dinner, Minato assigned the night watch. Shisui and I will take the first half of the night, Shishi, you and Sani will cover the second half. Understood. The three of them nodded, and Shishi and Sani immediately went to rest. It took them less than 2 minutes to fall into a deep sleep. Shishi was already used to this, while Sani put himself into a hypnotic state. At midnight, Shishi and Sani woke up on time to relieve Minato and Shisui. Fortunately, the night passed without incident. At 5 a.m., Minato got up to relieve Shishi and Sani. At 9 a.m., the team set off again. Less than half an hour later, the watchers reappeared. By the time they stopped for lunch, Sani couldn't hold back his frustration any longer. These guys are so annoying. Minato-sensei, why don't we just drive them away? Minato shook his head. If we do that, we might fall into their trap. He then smiled and reassured them, don't worry. Once we're out of the land of rain, they should leave us alone. As expected, once they left the land of rain, the watchers disappeared. Shishi and the others couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. These past few days had been mentally exhausting, far more so than physically tiring. However, Shishi couldn't stop pondering over the identity and motives of the watchers. The land of bears used to be a vassal of the land of earth, under Iwagakure's influence. The most likely culprits are Iwa-nin. But we can't rule out the possibility that Sunanin are behind this. Why would they just watch without making a move? As Shishi was deep in thought, Sani asked Minato the same question. Minato replied, regardless of which faction is involved, if their goal isn't to stop the mission to the land of bears, then they're probably after information. Upon hearing this, Shishi remarked, it seems like we'll be in big trouble on our way back. Sani clenched his fist. Then we'll give them a good beating when the time comes. On July 20th, Shishi Hashida and the others finally arrived at the daimyo's residence in the land of bears. The team then split into 2 groups, taking turns to protect the fire daimyo's envoy. This process lasted for 2 days without incident. On July 23rd, Shishi and his team left the land of bears, reaching the border of the land of rain 3 days later. Before entering the land of rain, Minato Namikaze solemnly declared, from here on out, we're in combat mode. The mission is the priority, not killing the enemy. The 3 of them nodded in unison. Understood. Minato continued, we'll split into 3 groups, Shisui and Sani, your group A, Shishi, your group B, and I'll be group C. Group B is responsible for guarding the mission target. You must not leave it. Any enemies that appear will be handled by groups A and C. If anyone gets injured, retreat to group B, and Shishi will take care of the healing. On July 28, Shishi and the others officially entered the land of rain. As expected, it didn't take long before Minato sensed ninjas watching them. Half an hour later, a large number of enemies appeared on both sides of the team, attempting to encircle them. Minato decisively ordered, Group B, protect the target and keep moving forward. Group A, engage on the left. Understood. Uchiha Shisui and Kurama Sani moved out, followed by Minato disappearing to the right. Shishi continued to guard the envoy as they advanced. About 10 minutes later, Minato and the others returned one after another. Uchiha Shisui immediately reported, Minato-sensei, they're trying to wear us down. These guys are from small ninja organizations in the land of rain, hired with bounties. Minato nodded, he had gathered the same information from the attackers. It seems we're going to face more ambushes. We need to change our plan. Minato decided, from now on, the three groups will take turns attacking until the real enemy appears. He then looked up at Shishi and asked, Shishi, any issues? Shishi shook his head. None. Minato immediately took out two specially made kunao, handing them to Shishi and Uchiha Shisui. Shishi, your task is to handle the enemies on the left. If you can't overpower them, just focus on evading and distracting them. Also, if the group on standby encounters a powerful enemy attacking the mission target, launch a signal flare. Understood. With a synchronized nod, Shishi surged with chakra and disappeared from his spot. Chapter 50, Harassment. The rain continued to drizzle. Shishi Hashida had only been patrolling for about 20 minutes when he sensed someone approaching. This area was unlike the dense forests of the Land of Fire, it was barren and exposed. Even with the rain obscuring the view, it was hard not to notice an enemy getting close. 6 people. Shishi eyed the 6 figures who had stopped 10 meters ahead. None of them bore the forehead protector of a ninja village. Konoha brat. Is he alone? For now, it seems so. They really underestimate us. The 6 men focused on Shishi, their faces twisting into bloodthirsty and cruel smiles. Let's start by taking out this brat. Attack. Kill this Konoha kid. The 6 who had stopped suddenly rushed forward, forming a crescent formation. With a senbon needle in his mouth, Shishi swiftly reached into his ninja tool pouch with his left hand and flung 3 shuriken. He followed up with a second throw, stronger and faster, which caught up with the first 3 shuriken. The 6 shuriken collided mid-air, altering their original flight paths. Thud, thud, thud. 3 of the enemies were struck, their screams piercing through the rain. Damn it! Bastard! Kill him! Screams, curses, and the sound of the rain blended together. Shishi charged forward, his right hand gripping the Totsuka blade and a kunao in his left. He darted straight towards the enemy in front, while the 2 on either side tried to circle around and flank him. Clang, clang, clang. The clash of steel echoed, sparks flying. You're too slow. You're all so slow, and you dare to come out and pick a fight. Shishi taunted mercilessly. The enraged enemy retorted, Brat, don't look down on us. Just as the enemy tried to intensify his attack, Shishi's blade had already sliced through his throat. Thud, thud, thud. 3 bodies fell in quick succession, their blood soaking into the muddy ground. The remaining 3, who had been hit by the shuriken, were momentarily stunned by the scene. But Shishi moved like a lightning bolt, and amidst a series of screams, the remaining 3 were also swiftly cut down. From the moment the fight started to its end, it didn't even take a minute. Neither the enemies nor Shishi had used any ninjutsu. They're all just cannon fodder. This probably won't be the last wave. Shishi cleaned up the battlefield, collecting any useful kunao and shuriken. There was no telling how many more battles lay ahead, so conserving ninja tools was essential. Sure enough, less than an hour later, another group attacked. Their strength was still lacking, Shishi quickly killed 2 of them, and the third fled in terror. He didn't bother to give chase. There was no need to waste time or energy on cannon fodder. Before nightfall, Shishi and his team had endured a total of 8 ambushes. The constant attacks slowed their progress, forcing them to camp out in the wilderness for the night. On the barren hillside, 6 samurai and the porters were busy setting up tents. The reason for choosing this spot to camp, rather than finding a cave, was to have a wide open view, making it nearly impossible for the enemy to approach undetected for a surprise attack. Of course, if the enemy turned out to be Iwanin as suspected, a cave would be even more dangerous. The real enemy should appear at dawn. Tonight's harassment is likely to continue, Minato Namikaze analyzed the situation. The enemy's tactic had become clear, constant harassment throughout the day using hired cannon fodder. Although it was unclear why the enemy had chosen this strategy, they were currently in a very passive situation. To change this, Minato made a decision. Shishi, your transformation jutsu is the best here. I'll need you to use a shadow clone to transform into the envoy. Shishi immediately understood. Minato-sensei, are you planning to use the Flying Thunder God technique to take the envoy away? Minato nodded. Exactly. The envoy is not only putting us in a passive position, but he's also the enemy's primary target due to the high intelligence value he holds. However, we also need the envoy as bait to draw out the real enemy and gather information from them. During the time I take the envoy away, it's crucial that the enemy doesn't realize what's happening. So, Shishi, you'll need to transform a shadow clone into the envoy, and I'll leave a shadow clone behind as well for cover. If any enemies attack, you must hold them off to prevent the plan from being exposed. Minato then smiled. If the real enemy shows up while I'm away, retreat immediately, my shadow clone will cover your escape. And if you can't withstand the harassment, retreat immediately as well. Of course, I'll return as quickly as I can. Kurama-sani patted his chest confidently. Don't worry, Minato-sensei. If it's just more of the same from today, we'll handle it without any problem. Shishi and Uchiha Shisui also nodded, though neither was as optimistic as Sani. The issue wasn't just strength, it was whether their mental and physical stamina could hold up under the constant harassment. But in any case, Minato's plan allowed them to proceed without worrying too much. Minato-sensei, why doesn't the enemy just attack and seize the envoy directly? We're just a small ninja squad with 6 samurai. If they can hire this many ninjas to harass us, why not send a large force at once to overwhelm us and take the envoy? Are they afraid we might kill the envoy if we can't hold them off? But this is a daimyo's envoy. Sani voiced his doubts. After a day of fighting, they had already killed over 20 enemies and driven off more than 10. Shishi chuckled. Maybe the enemy knows how strong Minato-sensei is and doesn't dare attack directly. Sometimes, numbers don't make a difference. At this point, Minato hadn't yet earned the nickname Yellow Flash, but as a young Genin of Konoha who had completed numerous missions, it was unlikely the enemy hadn't gathered intelligence on him. The Flying Thunder God technique, pioneered by the second Hokage, was surely known to other ninja villages. Minato smiled at Shishi's praise and said, "There's no need to dwell on why the enemy is acting this way. We'll find out once we capture the real enemy and interrogate them." After making these arrangements, the camp was just about set up when another wave of harassment arrived, but Minato and Uchiha Shisui quickly drove them off. Afterward, Minato went straight into the envoy's tent. He left behind a shadow clone and then departed with the envoy. A moment later, Minato's shadow clone exited the tent and Shishi and Sani entered the tent to rest. The 6 samurai continued to guard the tent, unaware that the envoy had already been taken away. The campfire flickered as Minato's shadow clone and Uchiha Shisui kept watch. An hour later, another night raid occurred. Shisui moved out and repelled the attackers. Another hour passed, and more enemies attacked. Shisui and the 6 samurai fought them off, but 1 samurai was killed, and 3 others were injured. Shishi, who had been resting, left a shadow clone in the tent and went outside to heal the injured samurai. The night was anything but peaceful, with harassment coming in waves. Shishi, Shisui, Sani, and the remaining 5 samurai were the main force fending off the enemy's attacks, while Minato's shadow clone held the position outside the tent. This didn't arouse the enemy's suspicion. Given the situation, it was reasonable for Minato to conserve his energy. At midnight, Minato returned to the tent. Shishi finally felt relieved, and began to look forward to the final battle. After being harassed all day, he was ready to unleash his pent-up frustration. Chapter 51, Extreme Speed. July 29, Dawn. On the barren hillside, Minato Namikaze, who was standing guard, suddenly called out, "Shisui, Sani, Shishi." The 3 resting in the tent immediately woke up and quickly exited one after another. Standing atop the tall hill, with no trees to obstruct their view, they could easily see figures emerging from all directions. At a glance, these people were clearly different from the ones who had harassed them the day before, not just in their appearance but also in their energy and demeanor. "Are they AIM Nin?" Kurama-sani asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. The newcomers were indeed wearing the forehead protectors of a Megakure. Shishi took out a soldier pill and swallowed it. That might not be the case. In the land of rain, it's common for everyone to disguise themselves as someone else, blending truth and lies. Minato added, "For now, don't worry about their identities." Before he could finish speaking, the ground began to tremble. Soon after, Shishi and the others saw the earth rise and form steps about 10 meters away from the hill, with the highest step quickly surpassing the height of the hill itself. Swish, swish, swish. A series of figures appeared on top of the towering earth wall, looking down on Shishi and the others. "Impressive earthwork." Shishi couldn't help but silently remark, but his vigilance was at its peak. "Be careful, these guys are likely IWA Nin," Minato warned. As soon as the words left his mouth, the ninja on the high earth wall launched their attack. Whoosh, whoosh, Whoosh! A barrage of kunao and shuriken rained down on them, though none were accompanied by explosive tags likely to avoid accidentally killing the envoy protected in the tent. Clang, clang, clang. Shishi's hands moved rapidly, wielding the Totsuka blade in one hand and a kunao in the other, deflecting all the incoming kunao and shuriken. Meanwhile, some of the attackers took advantage of this assault to leap down from the wall and rush toward the tent. As the first wave of attacks ended, the remaining attackers also jumped down from the wall. In an instant, Shishi and the others found themselves surrounded by over 20 enemies. Since his graduation, this was the first time Shishi had faced such a large-scale assault and fought on such a complex battlefield. So, as the first wave of enemies approached, he immediately swallowed a soldier pill and activated his tenfold concentration for the first time. At that moment, Shishi felt his already fast-thinking mind become even quicker, his reflexes more acute, and all 5 senses heightened. The sounds of battle cries, screams, and the clash of metal no longer affected him in the slightest. Fire release, great fireball technique. Without forming any hand signs, Shishi opened his mouth, unleashing a blast of flames. This was also the first time he revealed his ability to use jutsu without hand signs in front of the enemy. So sudden and at such close range, only one of the 3 charging enemies managed to barely dodge, while the other 2 were hit, sent flying, and landed as blazing torches on the ground. Watch out, this guy can use fire release without. The one who dodged the fire release was furious, but before he could finish his sentence, a blur flashed before his eyes. Shishi was already upon him. Slash! Blood splattered, and the enemy fell, clutching his throat. Shishi immediately turned and charged toward the 3 enemies facing Kurama Sani. Sani! Kurama Sani, who was at a disadvantage, instantly understood and retreated toward Uchiha Shisui. Shishi inhaled deeply, then unleashed several fireballs from his mouth. Fire release, Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Boom! 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 The flames collided with a wall that suddenly rose from the ground, causing it to crumble instantly, sending dust and debris flying everywhere. Shishi swiftly tore off his raincoat, attached it to a kunao, and threw it to the right, slicing through the dust. Over here! Someone shouted from behind the wall, but Shishi raised one hand, and 2 shadow clones materialized on either side of him. The 2 clones burst into action, one attacking from the left and the other leaping over the top of the crumbled wall. Clang! Clang! Both shadow clones' attacks were blocked, revealing that the enemy hadn't fallen for Shishi's bait. The shout had been a deliberate ruse. However, as the 3 enemies focused on the clones, Shishi struck from the right. A flash of his blade, and a head flew. Shishi decapitated the enemy who had his back to him. As one of the shadow clones was dispelled, Shishi dashed forward with lethal precision, slicing through 2 more enemies in an instant, blood splattering as their screams echoed. With only 1 shadow clone left, Shishi dispelled it and swallowed another soldier pill. By this time, Uchiha Shisui and Kurama Sani had already defeated the 3 enemies attacking them. Meanwhile, one of the enemy Jainin finally broke through the defenses and charged into the tent where Minato Namikaze and the others were. Inside the tent, the clone of Shishi, disguised as the envoy, appeared terrified. As the enemy lunged forward to knock him out, the clone raised a hand from beneath its sleeve. Boom! The clone, struck in the neck, instantly exploded into a cloud of smoke. The enemy's expression changed drastically as he looked down, only to see an explosive tag burning brightly. Not only that, but the hidden explosive tags on the tent also ignited in unison. Damn it! The intruder muttered, but before he could react further, he was consumed by the explosion and flames. Outside the tent, the moment the defenses were breached, Minato Namikaze didn't hesitate to order a retreat. Shishi had already deactivated his 10x concentration and, together with Uchiha Shisui, leaped onto the tall wall. The next moment, Minato Namikaze appeared beside them, and almost simultaneously, the tent on the hill exploded into a massive fireball, spreading flames in all directions. Several nearby enemies were blown away by the blast, and 5 of the samurai who didn't retreat in time were also knocked down the hillside by the shockwave. Shisui, Shishi, throw the kunao I gave you toward the enemies. Minato ordered as he threw several kunao himself. Shishi and Shisui immediately complied, hurling their kunao forward. In the blink of an eye, Minato vanished from their sight. At that moment, Shishi and the others witnessed what true speed really was. Kurama Sani couldn't even follow Minato's movements as the enemies began to fall one after another. Even Shisui's Sharingan couldn't fully track Minato's movements. Only Shishi, who had reactivated his 10x concentration as he threw the kunao, could catch glimpses of Minato's lightning-fast flickers, the process of him eliminating enemies, and then disappearing. So fast. If it were just kunao appearing nearby, and I was mentally prepared, I might be able to react under 10x concentration. But if the mark were on my body, I might not even have time to react. Shishi swallowed nervously. With kunao, Minato's appearance would be limited to a small area. But if the mark was on someone, Minato could appear on any side, front, back, left, right, or even above. I must get the chance to learn this jutsu in the future. Shishi resolved with determination. Chapter 52, No Hand Seals Ninjutsu. The battle ended with only one enemy left alive, intentionally spared by Minato Namikaze. All the others were killed. Shishi Hashida took down 6 enemies, Uchiha Shisui and Kurama Sani each took down 3, and the rest were dealt with by Minato Namikaze. As for the 5 samurai, each of them was injured, but none of them managed to kill a single enemy. Shishi was responsible for healing the 5 injured samurai, while Shisui and Sani used genjutsu to assist Minato in interrogating the surviving enemy to extract information. The captive was a genin, with an unusually strong will. Half an hour later, Shishi had finished treating the samurai, and Minato had successfully obtained the necessary intelligence. As suspected, these ninja were indeed from Uegakuer. Their goal was not only to extract information from the envoy of the Land of Fire but also to capture the envoy alive and frame Tsunagakuer for it. This was because Konoha and Tsunagakuer were already in conflict over the Land of Rivers. Provoking a larger conflict, or even a war, between Konoha and Tsunagakuer would be highly beneficial to Uegakuer. As for why they didn't directly assault them but instead used attrition tactics, the reason lay in Minato Namikaze. Even though Uegakuer had 3 genin, they weren't confident in taking on Minato. Minato, although not yet renowned as the Yellow Flash, had already gained a significant reputation in the ninja world, particularly for his incredible speed. Unfortunately for Uegakuer, they underestimated Minato Namikaze, as well as Shishi Hashida and the others' resilience and combat abilities. Shishi, in particular, stood out with his no-hand seals fire release, high focus, and rapid reflexes, allowing him to kill enemies even faster than Uchiha Shisui. However, this came at a considerable cost. After finishing the medical treatment, even though his physical strength had begun to recover, Shishi still couldn't resist the overwhelming drowsiness. The aftermath of using tenfold focus had left him quite fatigued. "Sensei, leave Shishi to me," said Shisui as he lifted Shishi onto his back. With heavy eyelids, Shishi murmured, "Thanks, Shisui." Without the burden of the envoy, their return journey after dealing with the enemy became much quicker. Of course, due to the presence of the 5 palanquin bearers, their pace still wasn't as fast as a group of pure shinobi traveling. By evening, the group had entered the Land of Fire. Shishi, having been carried alternately by Shisui and Sani throughout the journey, had fully recovered and was now full of energy once again. Sitting by the riverbank, with fish roasting over the campfire, Shishi couldn't help but reflect on the day's battle. He asked, "Sensei, it seemed like you didn't use any ninjutsu while using the Flying Thunder God technique." Earlier, Shishi had observed Minato Namikaze using the Flying Thunder God against an Uegakuer genin. However, Minato hadn't been able to finish him off in one strike because of the enemy's earth release, hardening technique. In the end, Minato decided to capture that genin instead. Hearing Shishi's question, Minato smiled wryly and explained, "Because the Flying Thunder God is so fast, there's hardly any time to perform hand seals or prepare ninjutsu in advance. Shishi, your sensei doesn't have your ability to use fire release without hand seals. That's why I'm working on creating a no-hand seals ninjutsu to pair with the Flying Thunder God for attacks, but I haven't succeeded yet." Although Minato said this, the original purpose of developing no-hand seals ninjutsu was different. "No-hand seals ninjutsu, that's amazing!" Kurama Sani exclaimed in awe, then asked, "Sensei, can we join you in training next time?" Minato smiled warmly and replied, "Of course, that's not a problem." The next day, Shishi and the others returned to the Daimyo's residence in the Land of Fire, where they were received by the Daimyo himself. They also took the opportunity to evaluate a few new shinobi the Daimyo had recruited. However, the atmosphere this time wasn't as intense as before, it was just a straightforward assessment. The new shinobi weren't as skilled as the previous batch, with most of them being at the level of Chunin, and not a single genin among them. Afterward, Shishi Hashida once again received a private audience with the daimyo. During the meeting, Shishi took the opportunity to recommend a few of Konoha's young geniuses to the daimyo. For instance, he mentioned Kakashi, the prodigy who graduated from the Konoha Ninja Academy at the youngest age since its founding. He also brought up Asuma Sarutobi, the son of the third Hokage. The daimyo was quite pleased with the mention of Kakashi, a name he had already heard of. However, he had some reservations about Asuma Sarutobi. After all, Asuma was the son of the Hokage. But Shishi quickly convinced the daimyo with a single sentence: recruiting the Hokage's son would have a greater impact than recruiting 10 other geniuses. As a result, when Shishi left, he had an additional 10 million RY in hand. As expected of the daimyo, he's incredibly wealthy. On the afternoon of July 31st, Shishi and his team finally returned to Konoha. After submitting the mission report and collecting their payment at the Hokage's office, Minato Namikaze announced a 1-week break. However, they agreed to meet the next day to observe his progress on a new jutsu. After freshening up and having lunch, Shishi made his usual visit to Konoha Hospital. This mission had taken nearly a month, making it the longest mission he had ever undertaken. Naturally, he missed Non-Yakushi after being away for so long. Upon arriving at Konoha Hospital, Shishi quickly found Non, who was busy treating injured ninja. "Let me help," Shishi offered as he approached. Non, with sweat on her forehead, looked up and was pleasantly surprised to see him. "Shishi." With a smile, Shishi began using the mystical palm technique, taking over Nan's position. However, the number of injured seemed higher than usual today, so Nan didn't get a break. Seeing this, Shishi sped up his work to help ease the burden on her. Before they knew it, the afternoon had passed. When the treatment was finally done, Shishi felt somewhat exhausted. "Good job." A familiar voice rang in his ears, and when he turned, he saw Tsunade standing there with a box of milk. "Thank you, Lady Tsunade." Shishi expressed his gratitude as he took the milk, then asked, "Lady Tsunade, why are there so many injured today? And many of them seem to be poisoned. Could it be the work of the Sand Ninja?" Tsunade nodded slightly. "It's from the land of rivers." As expected. Shishi frowned slightly but then quickly let it go. It wasn't his concern yet, he wasn't at that level. Focusing on improving his strength was the most important thing. "Lady Tsunade, let's continue training today." Of course, Tsunade agreed without hesitation. Shishi didn't mind getting beaten up. In fact, Tsunade found the secret technique training a bit dull without it. After saying goodbye to Nan, the two headed to the nearby training ground to begin their session. In addition to Taijutsu and fire release, Shishi also practiced Kenjutsu, particularly the dance of the crescent moon. But Shishi noticed that Tsunade seemed noticeably stronger than before. Her reaction speed had improved, and her attacks were faster too. Sensing Shishi's surprise, Tsunade snorted, "Kid, don't underestimate me. I may be a medical ninja, but I'm not the type who relies on others to protect me." Shishi quickly responded, "I wouldn't dream of underestimating you, Lady Tsunade. I was just thinking that you've gotten even stronger." Tsunade raised an eyebrow. "Stronger than before? So, does that mean I wasn't strong enough before? Is that supposed to be a compliment?" Unable to resist, Tsunade put a bit more force into her next attack. Chapter 53, Raise Nan. Words can be dangerous. Shishi Hashida learned this the hard way as he limped out of Konoha Hospital alongside Non-Yakushi. That night, Shishi stayed at Nan's place, as usual, diligently absorbing medical knowledge. When it was time to sleep, Shishi snuggled up to Nan and whispered softly, "Director, do you have someone you like?" "Hey." Nan was momentarily taken aback, then she smiled warmly. "Yes, Shishi, and also every child at the orphanage." Shishi continued, "It seems like Minato-sensei already has someone he likes." Nan turned her head, unable to see Shishi's expression clearly without her glasses, and teased, "It sounds like Shishi has someone in mind too. But it makes sense. Shishi is very popular with the girls." Hearing this, Shishi couldn't help but think of Shizun's face, followed by Tsunade's. He turned to look at Nan, feeling an inexplicable melancholy. A 6-year-old body with the soul of an adult. Nan was more than 10 years older than him. Perverted, this is just too perverted. Shishi silently chastised himself, then wrapped his arms around Nan's waist. "I want to stay with you forever, Director." Nan didn't think much of it and gently patted Shishi's back. That's what I hope for too. The next day, at 9 a.m., Shisui, Uchiha, and Sani Kurama followed Minato Namikaze to the place where he was developing a new jutsu. Seeing the large craters scattered around, Shisui was now completely certain. Raise Nan. Looking at the numerous pits, Sani couldn't contain his excitement. Minato-sensei, this must be a really powerful jutsu, right? I can't wait to see it. Minato smiled a bit sheepishly. The technique isn't complete yet, but I can show you a demonstration. With that, under the watchful eyes of the three, Minato raised his right hand, and chakra quickly gathered, forming a pale blue ball of swirling energy. However, the chakra sphere was extremely unstable, with chakra surging in all directions as if it might explode at any moment. Sani exclaimed, "That's amazing." The sheer amount of gathered chakra was astonishing. Shisui was equally impressed. Once it's fully developed, this will be an incredible jutsu. Minato, unable to maintain the stability of the technique, had to release it, leaving another large crater in the ground. Shisui observed thoughtfully. He didn't know if the inspiration for the Raise Nan came from the tailed beast bomb, but the current Raise Nan involved chakra spinning like a vortex, forcibly controlled by Minato's powerful chakra control. It was extremely unstable. In its current form, it was clearly not suitable for use in actual combat, especially with Minato's fast-paced fighting style. So, how could the chakra gathered in the hand be stabilized? Minato's version involved a single spiral. Could it require a double spiral? The inner layer of chakra rotating to the left, and the outer layer rotating to the right? It shouldn't be that simple. Shisui furrowed his brow slightly. Sani noticed and asked with a smile, "Shisui, are you thinking about how to help Minato-sensei complete this jutsu?" Shisui snapped out of his thoughts, nodded, and was about to speak when a sudden idea flashed through his mind, making his eyes light up. He quickly said, "Minato-sensei, I think I've got an idea. Shisui, Sani, can you two help me gather some vines?" Sani was puzzled. Vines? What do they have to do with Minato-sensei's jutsu? Shisui immediately smiled and said, "Just do as Shisui says." The three of them then leapt into action. As Minato watched them leave, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. Vines were not hard to find in Konoha, so Shisui and the others quickly collected a bunch and returned. In front of Minato, Shisui picked up a vine and said, "Minato-sensei, this represents the flow of chakra." As he spoke, he twisted the vine into a small ring and held it in his hand. But he didn't stop there. Shisui grabbed another vine and wound it around the first ring, but instead of wrapping it in the same direction or in the opposite direction, he wrapped the second ring perpendicular to the first. At this point, Minato already began to understand. But Shisui continued, "The vines represent the trajectory of the chakra flow. The first layer rotates in one direction, while the second layer rotates in another direction, holding down the chakra of the first layer to prevent it from expanding outward immediately. And then you keep adding more layers." As he explained, Shisui quickly wove more layers with the vines, and soon, a ball of vines appeared in his hand, tightly held by his fingers. He looked at Minato and the others, smiling. "By using the outer layer of chakra to suppress the inner layers, the final layer of chakra is controlled by us. This greatly reduces the difficulty and also stabilizes the large amount of compressed chakra." And then, Shisui slowly released his grip on the vine ball and Minato and the others saw the ball start to expand outward. As we attack the enemy and release the outer control, the chakra ball will expand from the inside out. Moreover, since it expands while rotating at high speed, it will increase the destructive power. The most important thing is that the expansion will not occur on the side of the ball that we control with our hand, but rather on the side that makes contact with the enemy. Although the vine ball in Shishi's hand wasn't an actual rotating chakra ball, Minato and the others weren't fools. Shishi's explanation was so clear and vivid that they could fully visualize what he was describing in their minds. Sani was stunned, then suddenly shouted, "Shisui, how did you come up with this?" Minato and Shisui also looked at Shisui with curiosity. Shisui smiled and said, "Have you ever seen a ball of yarn? It's used for knitting sweaters." The three of them exchanged glances, then all laughed awkwardly together. Minato then praised him, "Shisui, you have an incredible sensitivity to ninjutsu." Shisui added, "No wonder you can use fire release without hand signs." Shisui felt a bit embarrassed by the compliments but also proud. Because this idea didn't come from his knowledge as a reincarnated person, he only knew that the Raise Nan was amazing and had a rough idea of how Naruto trained to master it, but who knew how it actually worked? The inspiration had indeed come from a ball of yarn. Back at the orphanage, Non-Yakushi had once knitted a sweater for him. "Minato-sensei, you should give it a try first. We won't know if it works until you do," Shishi suggested. But Minato was already confident. "Shishi, I'm certain your method is correct." He had an exceptional sensitivity to ninjutsu. With that, Minato began to experiment. As the sound of wind whistling filled the air, the blue chakra ball in Minato's hand rapidly expanded. This time, it was very stable, unlike before. Shishi couldn't help but be amazed at Minato's talent. He had only explained the theory once, and Minato had already succeeded. Just then, there was a stirring in the tag system within Shishi's mind. Chapter 54, Seriously Injured. Although Minato Namikaze hadn't yet named the jutsu, the tag system had already recognized it as an A-rank technique. Even though Shishi Hashida didn't create the jutsu himself, he played a critical and groundbreaking role in its development. As for the previous technique, Seal Technique Memory Palace, it didn't quite reach A rank. But now, Shishi had taken a big step forward. He was just 4 A rank jutsu away from acquiring the Pioneer tag. At that moment, Minato flashed to a large tree, pressing the chakra ball in his right hand against it. With a resounding boom, the tree was completely pierced through. "Amazing!" Sani Kurama exclaimed. "A jutsu without hand signs, this is undoubtedly perfect for Minato-sensei. What should we call it?" Minato retracted his hand, looking at Shishi with a smile. "Let's call it Light Wheel Popsicle Initiating Shishi Yarn Ball." Shishi covered his face in exasperation, while Shisui Uchiha and Sani stood there, stunned. Seeing their reactions, Minato chuckled awkwardly. "What? You don't like the name? It has a lot of sentimental value, don't you think?" Shisui and Sani also gave awkward laughs. Shishi cleared his throat and suggested, "Minato-sensei, maybe go with something simpler. How about thinking about why you created this jutsu in the first place?" Minato's expression softened as he recalled Uzumaki Kushina and thought of the 9 tails. His face grew serious for a moment but quickly returned to his usual warm smile. "In that case, let's call it Raise Nan. T/N, there are other names for Raise Nan, like Spiraling Sphere, Spiral Chakra Sphere, Power Strike." Sani immediately raised his hand in agreement. "That's perfect. Raise Nan reflects the way the chakra rotates in this jutsu." Shisui nodded eagerly, worried that Minato might come up with another strange name. And so, the Raise Nan was born. With the jutsu successfully completed, Minato immediately offered to treat everyone to a big meal, which Shishi and the others gladly accepted. No way they were missing out on that. But before that, they didn't want to waste the rest of the morning. Minato became their sparring partner, while Shishi took the opportunity to practice not only Dance of the Crescent Moon but also the medical ninjutsu Yin Healing Wound Destruction. Both techniques required real combat experience to master since their key lay in perfect timing. Time flew by, and by noon, the 4 of them shared a hearty meal before parting ways. Shishi headed to Konoha Hospital to continue training with Tsunade, while Minato went to a place covered by a barrier. Kushina. Minato arrived at a house. The upstairs window opened, revealing a red-haired woman with an obviously annoyed expression. "Weren't you supposed to be training somewhere else? Why are you back?" Minato wasn't bothered by Kushina's attitude and smiled. "Thanks to Shishi's help, the new jutsu is complete, so I came to tell you." "Shishi." Kushina was puzzled. "You mean that genius kid you mentioned?" She knew how talented Minato was, so it surprised her that a jutsu that had troubled him for so long could be solved by a 6-year-old. Minato nodded with a smile. "Yes, Shishi Hashida. He has a remarkable talent for understanding jutsu." He extended his right hand, and a Raise Nan quickly formed. "See? This is the jutsu. I call it Raise Nan, and I created it specifically to protect you." Kushina stared at the Raise Nan in Minato's hand, stunned. It looks so much like the tailed beast bomb used by the 9 tails. Unknowingly, tears began to stream down Kushina's cheeks. Ever since Minato started spending so much time developing the new jutsu, they hadn't trained in sealing techniques together as often. She had thought he was losing interest in her, but now, seeing Minato's gentle smile, Kushina's heart softened, and she suddenly leaped out of the window. After hesitating for a moment, she threw herself into Minato's arms. Minato was momentarily surprised but then broke into a radiant smile. He dispersed the raised nan and hugged Kushina tightly. Kushina, I'll protect you well. While Minato Namikaze was enjoying the warmth of a beauty in his arms, Shishi Hashida was on the receiving end of a beating. How can you master yin healing wound destruction without taking some hits? Tsunade had said this with complete confidence. Shishi couldn't help but think that this wicked woman had discovered some kind of twisted pleasure in beating him up. And so, time slowly passed. For Shishi, vacations meant more time for training. He focused on medical ninjutsu, swordsmanship, basic taijutsu, physical conditioning, and speed reaction training with Shizuan, Guy, and the others. Nearly a month went by, and the training method Shishi had initially proposed had already been improved several times. It started with mud balls, then moved on to clay. Kakashi further refined it by using different colored chalk, special round-shaped chalks, and drawing a circle to limit the area. They then had to catch a specific colored chalk ball within the circle. Before he knew it, 3 days had passed. On this particular day, while Shishi was practicing the chakra scalpel medical ninjutsu at Konoha Hospital, he suddenly heard that Minato Namikaze had been severely injured and rushed to the hospital. Minato Namikaze, seriously injured? Shishi was momentarily stunned, but then quickly hurried over. Outside the hospital room, he saw not only Tsunade but also Hiruzen Sarutobi. Lord Third Hokage, Lady Tsunade. Shishi quickly approached and greeted them. Shishi. Hiruzen Sarutobi nodded and then reassured him, "Don't worry, Minato will be fine." Shishi nodded and noticed that Tsunade didn't look too happy. He then peered through the glass into the hospital room. Inside, the entire medical team was at work, with non-Yakushi among them. A slug was also perched on Minato's chest. A wound that pierced through his chest. Shishi speculated and immediately connected it to the Nine Tails and the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. It seems the Nine Tails seal isn't very stable right now, Shishi thought to himself. But it made sense. Uzumaki Kushina was only around 14 or 15 years old, roughly the same age as Minato. Whether it was her sealing techniques, her chakra level, or most importantly, her mastery of the adamantine sealing chains, she was certainly not at her peak. But I recall that Uzumaki Kushina had mission records. Was it before she became a Jinchuriki? Or were there some afterward as well? Shishi silently wondered. Time slowly ticked by. 3 hours later, a masked medical ninja emerged from the room with the slug. Lord Third Hokage, Lady Tsunade, Minato is out of danger. Hiruzen Sarutobi was finally at ease and nodded. Thank you for your hard work. Tsunade took the slug and said, "Since everything is fine now, I'll be going." With that, she turned and left. Hiruzen Sarutobi sighed, looking a bit awkward, took a drag from his pipe, and said, "Shishi, please take care of Minato." Pretending not to notice anything, Shishi quickly bowed. "Yes, Lord Third Hokage, you can leave Minato-sensei to me." "Good." Hiruzen nodded in satisfaction and then also left. Shishi looked back into the room and immediately sent a shadow clone to notify Shisui Uchiha and Sani Kurama. Chapter 55, Fire Release Swordsmanship. Due to Minato Namikaze's severe injuries, the originally planned vacation had to be extended. Shishi Hashida was quite pleased with this. After all, aside from Shisui Uchiha, Kakashi, and Guy, he also had Tsunade, a Jonin, as his sparring partner. Time flew by, and soon it was August 20th, when Minato was discharged from the hospital, fully recovered. However, Shishi and his 2 teammates were soon informed that Minato had another important mission. As a result, the 3 of them operated as a temporary team, taking on D-rank and C-rank missions, rarely leaving the land of fire. Autumn quietly arrived. On September 12th, beside Konoha Hospital. After just finishing a sparring session with Tsunade, Shishi sat on the ground, his mind fully focused on the tag tree. He had finally mastered the dance of the crescent moon technique. With that, he had fulfilled all the requirements for the Swordsmanship Expert tag. Activate. As the Swordsmanship Expert tag leaf turned green, Shishi immediately felt a surge of energy within him, similar to chakra but far more powerful. The Swordsmanship Expert tag had 2 effects, a 100% increase in swordsmanship talent and the ability to designate a ninja tool, enhancing its quality by 100%. He had yet to test the talent boost, but the surge of energy within him was clearly meant for enhancing the designated ninja tool. Without hesitation, Shishi drew his Totsuka blade. This short chakra blade, gifted by Tenka, was rather unremarkable among chakra blades, yet it was still incredibly valuable. In the ninja world, even among Jainin, not everyone had access to such a highly conductive chakra tool. High conductivity meant minimal chakra loss. With a thought, Shishi guided the newfound energy within him into the Totsuka blade. It flowed effortlessly. The energy instantly responded to his will, flooding into the blade. Shishi felt the Totsuka blade in his right hand tremble slightly, and a faint humming sound reached his ears. Soon, the energy had fully merged with the Totsuka blade, disappearing without a trace. When Shishi infused the blade with chakra again, his face lit up with delight. He could hardly feel any chakra loss. He then took out a kunao and swung the Totsuka blade. There was no sound of clashing metal, yet the kunao was sliced cleanly in two. The cut was incredibly smooth. True, it can cut through iron like mud. Although the kunao was just an ordinary one, most of the ninja tools on the battlefield were of similar quality. My Totsuka blade should now be considered a legendary weapon, right? Shishi chuckled to himself, sheathing the blade and picking up the split kunao before standing up to leave. I've almost mastered the yin healing wound destruction technique. Next, if I can fully master the chakra scalpel medical ninjutsu, I'll be able to acquire the medical expert tag. It's now September. If I aim to achieve this by the same time next year, with the tag's enhancements, I'll soon become a true medical expert. Shishi silently plotted out his plan. However, medical ninjutsu, like basic physical training, is a long-term pursuit. For now, my primary focus should still be on swordsmanship and kenjutsu. If his initial swordsmanship talent was at level 1, the ninja tool expert tag would have brought it to level 2. Then, with the 50% boost from the Konoha genius tag, it would be at level 3. Finally, with the current 100% boost from the swordsmanship expert tag, it would reach level 6. With such talent, I should already surpass Shisui, Kakashi, and the others, right? Although he had some doubts, Shishi was confident. Before long, he arrived at a small grove. This was the place where he originally trained with Guy, and now it served perfectly as a secluded spot for his solo training. Because the time had come for Shishi Hashida to forge his own path in swordsmanship, a path that would lead him to becoming a Jainin. First, he created a shadow clone to grind leaves, continuing his training in wind release chakra nature transformation. Meanwhile, Shishi himself sat cross-legged under a tree, laying the Totsuka blade across his knees. He then pondered a crucial question: what kind of swordsmanship or kenjutsu technique should he develop? It needed to be at least an A-rank jutsu. His initial thought was to focus on wind release. Utilizing the cutting power of wind in combination with the Totsuka blade seemed ideal, and it would certainly rival the lightning blades of Killer Bee, the Eight Tails Jinchuriki. However, he had yet to complete his training in wind release chakra nature transformation. Although more than 2 months had passed, he hadn't dedicated much energy to it, only accumulating experience slowly through a single shadow clone. Now I have two options: I could first unlock the wind release expert tag, gaining a boost in wind release talent, and then quickly finish my wind release chakra nature training. Once perfected, I could apply it to my swordsmanship. Alternatively, I could complete the wind release nature transformation training first, then quickly master 5 wind release jutsu, unlock the wind release expert tag, and apply that to my swordsmanship. Or, I could continue to have a shadow clone grind away at wind release nature transformation, while I focus on developing a swordsmanship technique suited to my current abilities. Shishi's thoughts raced, and he soon made a decision. For now, his talent in fire release clearly surpassed that in wind release. There was no need to overlook the obvious. Let's start with fire release. Is there any precedent in the ninja world for combining fire release with swordsmanship? How can I merge them to achieve a synergistic effect greater than the sum of its parts? Having set his direction, Shishi began a brainstorming session, doubling his concentration. The nature of fire release: high heat, explosion. Explosion can be put aside for now. Shishi considered high heat. In reality, when lightning release is infused into a blade, aside from the paralyzing effect of the electricity, it primarily utilizes high-temperature cutting. He recalled the battle between Killer Bee and Team Taka. T/N, that episode was awesome. Killer Bee had infused his blade with lightning release, cutting straight through Zabuz's executioner's blade. But in the end, it was about high temperatures. Just like plasma arc cutting, which involves high current plasma arcs. Moreover, Killer Bee could also infuse lightning release into a pen, using high-frequency vibrations to enhance its piercing power. Shishi stood up and drew his blade, infusing it with fire release chakra. The blade of the Totsuka blade began to turn red, and the air around it started to warp. Suddenly, Shishi stopped, frowning slightly as he looked down at the gradually cooling blade. No, I shouldn't just be heating the blade. The Totsuka blade is fine, it's of high quality and has been enhanced by the tag, so it can withstand high temperatures. But other weapons might not be so durable. Also, heating the blade results in significant energy loss and takes time. I should instead create a high temperature layer directly on the blade's surface, or even across the entire blade. Shishi thought of the Raise Nan. The Raise Nan was a non-elemental jutsu that involved orderly chakra rotations layered into a chaotic spinning sphere. Likewise, he could construct an orderly fire-release chakra flow on the blade. Yes, I'll start by covering the entire blade and then refine it. Shishi resumed his experimentation. A layer of flames enveloped the blade, but soon, under his control, the flames disappeared, leaving only a red glow surrounding the blade. Shishi gradually refined the technique, wrapping the fire-release chakra around the blade like wires, spiraling around it in continuous loops. With each loop, the red glow deepened. After the first layer, he added a second, compressing the first layer of fire-release chakra, and repeated the process, layering and compressing over and over. The glow enveloping the blade constantly shifted in color. Red, dark red, cherry red. By the 10th layer, the glow had turned a deep orange red. By this point, Shishi was drenched in sweat, pushing his limits. He immediately dashed forward, the blade slicing through a thick tree trunk. Chapter 56, Jiraiya. Boom. The tree trunk fell with a crash, and Shishi Hashida took a few deep breaths, his eyes fixed on the cut surface, which was now charred. The cutting was indeed easier, with the added effect of high-temperature burns. The direction is correct, but it still needs further refinement and detail. After consuming a soldier pill, Shishi continued to analyze his progress. He needed a more efficient chakra nature transformation, faster chakra circulation, and greater chakra control. Once his stamina was restored, he resumed his efforts. Again and again, he tried, refining his technique with each attempt. Time flew by in this manner, and before he knew it, the 3-day break was over, and it was back to missions. However, even during missions, Shishi didn't stop developing his swordsmanship techniques. While taking a break during a patrol mission on the northern border, Shishi focused on perfecting his new technique. Watching him, Kurama-sani scratched the back of his head. He had just thought of developing a new genjutsu, but his mind was completely blank. I'm definitely not a genius. Kurama-sani sighed in frustration. Minato Namikaze smiled and reassured him, you don't need to compare yourself to Shishi. The reason he's developing his own sword technique is because he has a natural advantage with fire release. Sani, if you focus on genjutsu, the techniques you already know are enough for you to master. Kurama-sani was immediately convinced, his frustration disappearing. Then he asked, Shishi, how exactly do you plan to combine fire release with swordsmanship, or your blade techniques? In the ninja world, swordsmanship generally refers to the use of both swords and blades, but Shishi preferred to use the term blade techniques. Shishi looked up with a smile and said, rather than just combining fire release with blade techniques, it's more about integrating chakra and ninjutsu with swordsmanship. And chakra can be used in two main ways, nature transformation and shape transformation. For example, Minato Sensei's Raise Nan is a pure application of chakra shape transformation. In my case, I'm focusing on nature transformation, with shape transformation as a secondary factor. The nature transformation I'm dealing with is fire release, specifically its high temperature properties. Shape transformation is involved in how chakra is manipulated to allow me to layer fire release chakra more effectively, increasing the temperature and enhancing the blade's cutting power. Minato was impressed by Shishi's clarity of thought. That's a very clear development process, Shishi. You have an even greater talent for ninjutsu than I do. Shishi humbly replied, only with fire release. But Minato shook his head slightly. No, this kind of thinking can be applied to the development of any technique. At this point, Shisui Uchiha asked, so, Minato-sensei, does that mean your Raise Nan could also incorporate nature transformation and evolve into a new technique? Minato nodded. That's true. I've considered it as well. But so far, I haven't made much progress. Adding nature transformation to chakra makes it harder to control, and the Raise Nan is already highly refined. Adding a nature transformation could destabilize it. By the end, Minato couldn't help but shake his head in frustration. The original inspiration for Rei's Nan came from the tailed beast bomb, but taking it further had proven challenging without a clear direction. Shishi, of course, knew about the wind release, Rasen Shuriken and wind release, Rei's Nan, but he hadn't fully grasped the theory behind it, so he couldn't explain it. The timing wasn't right. Time flew by, and by the time Shishi Hashida returned to Konoha after completing his border patrol mission, it was already October. On this day, Shishi exited the Konoha hospital and headed to the nearby training ground to find Tsunade, only to discover an additional person there. Jiraiya, he's actually back. At this time, Nagato and the others are only about 10 years old, right? Shishi was secretly surprised but continued to approach. Lady Tsunade. Shishi greeted her and then respectfully turned to Jiraiya. Jiraiya-sama, I am Shishi Hashida. Jiraiya, who was in the middle of a conversation, turned around and looked down at Shishi, confused. Where did this little brat come from? Do you know who I am? Ha ha ha, it seems like I haven't been back in a while, but my fame still precedes me. Shishi was speechless. Jiraiya had returned to Konoha but hadn't gone to see his student Minato first, instead, he came to find Tsunade. Truly, he deserved his title as the pervy sage. And he was quite full of himself, too. Despite his inner thoughts, Shishi kept a pure and innocent smile on his face. Of course. You're one of the legendary Sunin of Konoha, just like Lady Tsunade, a remarkable ninja. Jiraiya was immediately pleased and struck a pose. Rather than the title of Sunin, I prefer you to call me the Mystic Toad Sage of Mount Maiboku, commonly known as the Toad Sage, at your service. Tsunade, standing nearby, couldn't help but roll her eyes. Idiot. Jiraiya's expression froze for a moment, deflating his excitement. Tsunade huffed, did you forget you have a student? Jiraiya instantly recovered and grinned, there's no need to worry about Minato. He's a once-in-a-decade genius, a natural-born ninja. Shishi chimed in at the right moment, Jiraiya-sama, Minato-sensei is currently my team leader. Team leader? Jiraiya laughed, as expected of Minato. I haven't seen him in a few years, and he's already become a Jonin and started mentoring the next generation. But then he quickly caught on, wait, you're here to learn medical ninjutsu from Tsunade. Shishi nodded, but Tsunade, already impatient, waved her hand dismissively, we need to start training. Jiraiya nodded and walked off with a casual wave, saying, let's grab a drink tonight. Got it. Tsunade replied offhandedly. As Jiraiya left, Shishi and Tsunade began their training. However, instead of medical ninjutsu, they focused on the yin seal, a sealing technique. Meanwhile, after walking some distance, Jiraiya paused and looked back at Tsunade with a smile. Looks like things aren't as bad as I thought. The first thing Jiraiya did upon returning was gather information and then visit Hiruzen Sarutobi. It was only then that he learned about Tsunade's hemophobia, prompting him to come see her immediately. At first glance, Tsunade seemed a bit lethargic, but now she appeared quite motivated. Feeling somewhat reassured, Jiraiya turned and went to find Minato Namikaze. Due to his high aptitude, Shishi quickly grasped the essentials of sealing techniques. However, the yin seal was quite unique, as it was specifically designed for sealing chakra, involving both chakra refinement and control. Shishi's chakra control was naturally strong due to his medical ninjutsu training, but there were still details he needed to consult Tsunade on. Additionally, Shishi's situation was different from Tsunade's. Tsunade didn't use chakra often except during sparring sessions, allowing her to store it up in the seal. Moreover, once the yin seal was initiated, it had to be sustained until completed, interrupting it meant starting over. If the stored chakra was insufficient, the seal would lose its significance. Shishi, on the other hand, frequently needed chakra for training and missions. He couldn't afford to waste 3 years storing chakra just for the yin seal. This was an issue Shishi recalled that Sakura Harano also faced, and her solution was to create a small reservoir within the seal to divert chakra. The larger pool was for storage, and the smaller one for regular use. However, Shishi had a different idea. Lady Tsunade, the yin seal gathers chakra at the forehead for storage, but does it necessarily have to be on the forehead? The human body has 3 major chakra circulatory systems: the forehead, the heart, and the abdomen, all of which can distribute chakra throughout the body. Shishi asked, so, would it be feasible to place the yin seal on the abdomen instead? Hearing this, Tsunade began to ponder the idea. Chapter 57, Yin Seal and 8 Trigram Seal. The Yin Seal technique originated from Tsunade's grandmother, Uzumaki Mito. It could be said that this technique belongs to the Uzumaki clan, but in reality, no member of the Uzumaki clan had ever practiced it before Uzumaki Mito. This was because Uzumaki Mito herself was the creator of the technique. The reason she chose to place it on the forehead was naturally due to the fact that the tailed beast within her was sealed in her abdomen. In fact, the Yin Seal was originally developed as a countermeasure against the Nine Tails, using a vast amount of chakra to suppress it. The Nine Tails had been sealed within Uzumaki Mito for so long without causing any issues and was thoroughly subdued not only because of Mito's own strength but also due to the effectiveness of the Yin Seal. Of course, Tsunade didn't mention any of this to Shishi Hashida. Instead, she said, "There's no problem with placing the Yin Seal on the abdomen, but how do you plan to address the issue we discussed last time?" She had a solution in mind, but she wanted to test Shishi's understanding. Shishi smiled and replied, "Lady Tsunade, you're surely familiar with the four-symbol seal. I once asked Minato-sensei about sealing techniques, and he taught me this particular seal. So, my idea is to use two four-symbol seals in conjunction with the Yin Seal to create a cycle, one seal for intake and the other for output, ensuring they don't interfere with each other." Tsunade fell into deep thought, her mind already beginning to piece together the combination of the three seals. After a moment, she nodded, "Technically, this seems feasible. And this design does indeed suit you better. However, it does add a significant level of difficulty. Besides mastering the Yin Seal, you'll also need to learn the four-symbol seal, which will require more time." Shishi chuckled, "Although I do feel like my chakra is insufficient at times, I'm not even 7 years old yet, there's no rush." Tsunade, seeing his confidence, didn't argue further and nodded, "All right, let's proceed with this plan. You can ask Minato to teach you the four-symbol seal." With that, she cracked her knuckles, the joints popping loudly, "Since you're not learning the Yin Seal today, let's resume our sparring from before. Your control over chakra bursts is still quite unrefined." Shishi's eyelids twitched, and he quickly responded, "Wait, Lady Tsunade. Although placing the Yin Seal on the abdomen is a good idea, it doesn't mean I should abandon the previous approach. Why choose when you can have it all?" At the residence of the Nine Tails Jinchuriki, Jiraiya found Minato Namikaze there, studying sealing techniques with Kushina Uzumaki. Minato was thrilled to see Jiraiya. "Jiraiya-sensei, you're finally back." "Yes." Reflecting on his time in the Land of Rain, Jiraiya smiled warmly, "It was a very special journey." "So, Minato, have you completed that idea you mentioned a while ago?" Hearing this, Kushina, who had just brought tea, chimed in, "Jiraiya-sensei, are you talking about the Raise Nan?" "Raise Nan?" Jiraiya, eager to see it, said, "As expected of Minato, looks like you've finished it. Show me quickly." Minato smiled, "If it weren't for Shishi, I wouldn't have completed it so quickly. Shishi is the student I'm currently mentoring, an exceptionally talented and outstanding ninja." At this, the image of that polite, gentle, and well-mannered kid popped into Jiraiya's mind, and he realized, so it was him. No wonder Tsunade took a liking to him, he seems quite remarkable. "Oh, Jiraiya-sensei, you've already met Shishi." "Yes, Shishi has indeed gained Lady Tsunade's favor. His talent in medical ninjutsu is also exceptional, he's already become a fully capable medical ninja." Minato Namikaze was full of praise. Jiraiya smiled and said, "It seems like you've taken a special interest in nurturing him, Minato. There's a difference between a student and a personal disciple." "That's true," Minato admitted, then extended his right hand and opened his palm. "But for now, let's take a look at the new jutsu." Buzz. The air stirred as the blue Raise Nan rapidly formed in his hand. Jiraiya's eyes widened. "What a perfect jutsu, and it suits you so well." Kushina Uzumaki, hands on her hips, interjected, "Jiraiya-sensei, this jutsu was developed by Minato for me, and it's most suited for me." Jiraiya, not wanting to provoke the fiery Kushina, quickly laughed, Of course, of course. This jutsu is just right for dealing with that Nine Tails. The power of this technique is entirely determined by the amount of chakra you put into it." Kushina sighed, "Right now, all my chakra is being used to suppress that pesky Nine Tails. Otherwise, I could store chakra using the Yin Seal." Minato quickly reassured her, "Once you master the adamantine sealing chains technique even better, you'll be able to suppress the Nine Tails more effectively. Also, your chakra reserves haven't yet reached their peak, while the 9 tails won't get any stronger. Hearing this, Kushina immediately brightened up and smiled, that's true. Humph, when the time comes, I'll make sure to give that 9 tails a good lesson. Watching the two, Jiraiya couldn't help but think to himself, they really are a perfect match. One is oblivious, and the other is sincere. After returning home from the Konoha hospital, Shishi Hashida officially began training in the Yin Seal. Simply put, the Yin Seal involves creating a chakra storage area at the point between the eyebrows, which can be thought of as a reservoir, with chakra being the water. However, unlike Tsunade, Shishi needed to create 2 reservoirs, one large and one small. The larger one was specifically for storing chakra to be used in critical moments. The smaller one was for everyday use. Although this approach was somewhat cumbersome, until he mastered the 4-symbol seal and 8-trigram seal, this was the best he could do. Unlike when he used the Memory Palace seal, Shishi's skills in sealing techniques had significantly improved. He no longer needed to pre-draw the sealing script before using it. Instead, he could use hand seals to assist in transforming his chakra into talismans, forming the sealing script. Still, it took him a full minute to complete the hand seals. Yin Seal. As he completed the final hand seal, Shishi brought his hands together, and his body was immediately covered in dense, tadpole-like symbols. These symbols then converged toward his forehead, forming the Yin Seal mark before it faded from sight. Afterward, Shishi lowered his eyes and began refining his chakra, channeling it into the 2 reservoirs within the seal. On October 6, year 39 of the Konoha calendar, Shishi Hashida officially began training in the Yin Seal. To better develop Ninjutsu and achieve the medical expert tag, Shishi started reducing his missions outside the village. Most of his time was spent at the Konoha hospital or training within the village, occasionally going on missions with Minato and the others. Before he knew it, the temperature began to drop, signaling that autumn was deepening. One day, feeling exhausted, Shishi invited Tsunade to relax at a hot spring, but when she declined, he decided to head to Konoha's hot spring street alone for some well-deserved relaxation. Hey! Shishi noticed someone on the roof. That old pervert Jiraiya. Shishi stopped in his tracks. Peeping? How immoral! This definitely needs a stern reprimand. Chapter 58, Master Tags. How should I reprimand him? Shishi Hashida pondered for a moment, rubbing his chin, and then a smile appeared on his lips. The next moment, his figure silently transformed into Tsunade's form. He knew Tsunade very well, down to the smallest details. He crossed his arms, furrowed his brows, tilted his twin ponytails, and shouted with authority, Jiraiya. On the rooftop, Jiraiya, who was thoroughly engrossed in his peeping and constantly shifting his position, heard the voice and turned his head. He was shocked out of his wits. Tsunade. Oh no! Shishi, in Tsunade's form, had already lifted a leg and brought it down in a powerful axe kick. Crack! The ground split open, the force reverberating through the building, and the roof beneath Jiraiya gave way. He plummeted into the hot spring bathhouse below, accompanied by the shrieks of women. Moments later, Jiraiya scrambled out of the bathhouse in a panic, with a group of women in bathrobes chasing after him. Shishi, having reverted to his normal form, quickly used the transformation jutsu to blend in with the women, joining them in pummeling Jiraiya with their fists. Jiraiya was chased all around the area, finally escaping by relying on his mastery of the transformation jutsu, substitution jutsu, and clone jutsu. Feeling completely refreshed, Shishi returned to the bathhouse. Still, in Tsunade's form, he compensated the bathhouse owner for the damage and then chose another spot to enjoy a relaxing soak in the hot springs. Next time, I should come here with Director Non. Shishi closed his eyes, letting his mind wander. Meanwhile, Jiraiya, now sporting several lumps on his head, sighed. Who would have thought there'd be a ninja involved? He chuckled afterward, but this field study turned out to be quite fruitful. Too bad Tsunade wasn't inside. Jiraiya felt a tinge of regret, but quickly dismissed the thought, recalling how close he'd come to being beaten to death last time. As for whether the Tsunade he just encountered was real or not, he didn't give it much thought after all. This was Konoha, and Tsunade's personality was exactly like that. Time passed unnoticed amidst training and missions, and before long, it was the 40th year of Konoha. Shishi Hashida's 7th birthday quietly slipped by while he was on a mission. On a cliff. After a sparring match, Shishi and Kakashi sat side by side, watching the sunset. Down below, Guy and the others were still training, the area buzzing with activity. Kakashi, how's your jutsu coming along? After catching his breath, Shishi asked. Kakashi shook his head slightly, controlling the nature of lightning release is proving difficult. And you? Shishi lay back on the ground. I've made initial progress in the first step, which is incorporating fire release nature into my blade techniques. Of course, this also involves shape transformation, but it's still far from mastering the ultimate technique. But everything needs to be done step by step. You can push forward gradually. The key is to have a clear direction. You need to know what kind of result you want, or what kind of effect you need to achieve. Then, figure out what conditions or qualities are required for that. Kakashi listened thoughtfully, then stood up. Thanks. But even though you've outpaced me again, the contest isn't over yet. With that, Kakashi leaped off the cliff. Shishi Hashida stood up, watching Kakashi's retreating figure with a smile. Despite his cool and aloof demeanor, Kakashi was actually quite competitive. Cold on the outside, warm on the inside, with a touch of pride. But developing a new jutsu from scratch was indeed a challenge. Just look at Minato Namikaze, he was a prime example. Shishi knew this all too well from personal experience. Even with his tag system's boosts, enhancing his fire release and swordsmanship talents repeatedly, it still took him nearly half a year to truly complete the first step. This step alone could already serve as a jutsu similar to the Chidori blade. The tag tree even recognized it as an A-rank technique, or perhaps a swordsmanship secret technique. However, what concerned Shishi the most at the moment was the tag titled Taijutsu Expert. After more than a year, he finally achieved his 50th victory over Kakashi in Taijutsu matches today. The tag he had been longing for was finally within his grasp. Focusing his attention on the tag tree in his mind, Shishi examined the Taijutsu Expert tag. Taijutsu talent, increased by 100%. Physical constitution, increased by 100%. Nerve response speed, increased by 100%. His mind went blank, his body tingling as if electrified. When he came back to his senses, Shishi felt stronger than ever. First word, amazing. Second word, incredible. While the boost in Taijutsu talent was not immediately noticeable, the enhancements in physical constitution and nerve response speed were instantly perceptible. His thought processes became quicker, his nerve responses faster, and his concentration more intense. Shishi could now clearly see the rapid flapping of a fly's wings. This dynamic vision, how does it compare to the three-tomo Sharingan? A smile spread across Shishi's face as he relaxed his heightened focus. Even if my dynamic vision isn't quite on par, how many Uchiha can match my nerve response speed? The Sharingan may evolve and enhance vision, but the rest of the nervous system can't compete with me now. After adjusting to the changes in his body, Shishi turned his attention to another tag on the tree. Tag, Fire Release Master. Condition to obtain, on the basis of the Fire Release Expert tag, create 5 A-rank Fire Release Jutsu or 1 S-rank Fire Release Jutsu. Effects. Fire Release Talent, increased by 100%. Fire Release Chakra Nature Transformation, increased by 100%. Fire Release Shape Transformation, increased by 100%. Any Fire Release Jutsu or fire-related secret technique, excluding Kekkei Genkai-related ones, can be learned without obstacles. This tag was clearly an upgraded version of the Fire Release Expert tag. The 3 100% boosts were certainly tempting. However, the requirements were tough. Whether it's an A-rank Fire Release or an S-rank one, they're not easily created. Especially in Fire Release. Shishi couldn't even recall any straightforward Fire Release ultimate techniques in the ninja world. Even A-rank ones are rare, let alone S-rank. He then turned his gaze to another newly triggered tag. Tag, Sword Master. Condition to obtain, defeat Sakumo Hatake in a swordsmanship duel or create 1 S-rank swordsmanship technique. Effects. Swordsmanship talent, increased by 100%. Physical constitution, increased by 100%. Designated ninja tools, quality increased by 100%. Any swordsmanship or kenjutsu, excluding Kekkei Genkai-related ones, can be learned without obstacles. Again, 3 100% boosts, with the physical constitution boost being particularly enticing. But the requirements made Shishi's eyelid twitch. He didn't know what event in the original story led to Sakumo Hatake's suicide, but anything that caused such great losses to the Land of Fire and Konoha wouldn't be minor. However, with his current status and strength, it wasn't something he could intervene in at will. Thankfully, it's a choice between two options. Shishi sighed in relief, his eyes turning to Kakashi as he furrowed his brows. Could it have something to do with that incident in the land of rivers? Shaking off his thoughts, Shishi considered his situation. 2 master tags at once. How do I trigger the Taijutsu master tag? Apart from that, since obtaining the Sealing Expert tag, no more advanced tags had been triggered. Oh well, these tags are already enough to keep me busy. Putting these thoughts aside, Shishi suddenly leaped off the cliff, sprinting downward. With his enhanced physical constitution, he needed to explore its full potential, especially now that he was training in the Yin Seal. Chapter 59, Konoha must not lose. Hey, did I get a bit taller? While washing up in the morning, Shishi Hashida noticed something was off. After finishing, he measured himself and confirmed it. He had grown 2 centimeters taller since the last time he measured a week ago. He was now 1.3 meters tall. This made him quite tall compared to his peers, almost catching up to Shisui Uchiha and Sani Kurama, who were 2 years older. The boost to my physique is really something. After the last enhancement to my physical constitution, my stamina was slightly better than Kakashi's. If I underestimated a bit, I'd say our chakra reserves were about equal. But now that my physique has doubled again, I can probably claim to have 2 Kakashi units worth of chakra. Shishi was delighted. It had been a week since he acquired the Taijutsu Expert tag. Of course, these 2 Kakashi units were in comparison to the current Kakashi, not the adult version. But the improvement in his physique also meant that his potential for growth had increased accordingly. This would require continued training and exploration to fully realize. After all, even in the Senju clan, and for Senju Hashirama himself, chakra reserves didn't start out as overwhelmingly vast at birth. However, when he thought about the sage body and the Uzumaki clan's physique, Shishi quickly calmed down. After 2 enhancements to his physique, he only had 2 Kakashi units. Without these enhancements, his chakra reserves might have only reached the level of a Chunin at best. I still need to work hard. Compared to Nagato, who had mastered 6 mainstream jutsu, 5 basic nature transformations and yang release, by the age of 10, I'm still not much. And my chakra reserves are nowhere near Naruto's level, and probably still fall short of Jiraiya's peak as well. Of course, Jiraiya was currently at the height of his power. His chakra level was the ceiling for people without special physiques. After packing his gear and slinging his scroll over his back, Shishi headed out. Once they gathered at their usual spot, Minato Namikaze promptly announced the mission. This time, we're headed to the land of rivers. Shishi, you should remember that we had a skirmish with the Sand Shinobi in the land of rivers last year, right? Shishi nodded. He remembered it well. Many Konoha shinobi were injured, and he had helped treat them. Seeing this, Sani Kurama immediately asked, so, is this mission related to our previous one, Minato-sensei? Minato nodded. It is indeed related. The daimyo of the land of rivers didn't cut ties with Tsunagakure after that incident. According to our intelligence, Tsunagakure discovered an iron mine in the land of rivers, and merchants from the land of fire lost out in the competition for it. In addition, there are signs that Tsunagakure is forming an alliance with Omegakure. However, the situation in Omegakure is being handled by the ANBU and Root divisions. Our mission is in the land of rivers. After the last skirmish, both sides have been in a standoff, but as the competition for the iron mine intensifies, the appetite of the land of wind and Tsunagakure has grown. They've begun targeting the commercial activities of the land of fire in the land of rivers. So, our mission is to eliminate the Sand Shinobi and protect the merchants and caravans from the land of fire. The 3 of them nodded in unison. Understood. Then, let's move out. Minato gave the order and led the way, with Shishi and the others following closely behind. After leaving the village, they traveled along the main road for a while before turning off into the dense forest, heading southwest straight toward the land of rivers. By midday, the 4 of them rested near the fire country border and had a meal of grilled fish by the river. On April 6, year 40 of the Konoha, just after 1 p.m., the team crossed the border and entered the land of rivers. Minato-sensei, I'd like to visit that village from last time, Shisui Uchiha suddenly said. Minato Namikaze was momentarily surprised, then nodded. All right. Shishi Hashida pondered for a moment before following the change in direction. Before long, the group arrived at the village in the land of rivers where they had completed their mission last year. But now, the village was in ruins, with no signs of life. The houses were dilapidated, serving as shelters for various animals. In just a year, everything had changed, and the people were gone. Shisui Uchiha stood there, stunned, while Sani Kurama asked, "Were the people here relocated?" Shisui's expression shifted slightly. Though innocent, he wasn't naive or foolish. Having personally killed all the men in this village, he was beginning to realize certain truths. Shishi, however, thought of Orochimaru, and by extension, Danzo. Considering that those who would even dare to target shinobi near Konoha, or even Konoha shinobi themselves, the fate of the people from this village might have been a mercy if death was the outcome. If they had been used in human experiments, they might have suffered fates worse than death. Perhaps I should have realized this back then, but as the saying goes, those who are pitiable often have a reason to be hated. Besides those who raided the land of fire, the other villagers also benefited from those actions. Shishi was clear-headed. While he wouldn't want to personally slaughter a village, he wasn't naive enough to believe that forgiveness or understanding was the answer. He didn't have that right. Of course, if the villagers were taken by Orochimaru for human experiments, that would indeed be inhumane. What a twisted world this is. Everyone noticed that Shisui seemed off, so Shishi walked up and patted him on the shoulder. Everyone must face the consequences of their actions. Those who kill must be prepared to be killed, and those who rob must be ready for punishment. Maybe the women and children of this village didn't participate, but they did benefit from the spoils of the raids. That's the karma they must bear. They may seem pitiable, but those we should truly pity and protect are the innocent people of the land of fire who were robbed and killed. People are always hypocritical. What's important is whose side you're on. Right now, they were on the side of the land of fire, on the side of Konoha. Not on the side of the land of rivers, and certainly not on the side of this village. Of course, Shishi didn't know that Shisui had participated in the slaughter of the adult men in this village. But even if he did, so what? As he said before, Shishi was on Konoha's side, and Shisui was his comrade, his teammate. "Thank you, Shishi," Shisui said, his expression returning to normal. Seeing this, Minato immediately ordered, "Let's continue." The group set off again, and within 10 minutes, they arrived at a hill overlooking a small town. Minato spoke, "This valley town is the first stop for merchants from the land of fire entering the land of rivers. While the mission load in the land of rivers includes contributions from Konoha, the expulsion of fire country merchants this year means that part of our mission load has been taken over by the Sand Shinobi." Looking at the town ahead, Shishi asked, "So, Minato-sensei, we're the vanguard in this operation?" Minato nodded. "Exactly. Tsunagakure isn't trying to escalate this into a full-scale war, so they haven't stationed a large force at the border. Instead, they're securing key locations towns to establish de facto control over the land of rivers." Shishi pondered aloud, the daimyo of the land of rivers probably doesn't want to completely sever ties with the land of fire. Right now, they're allowing Tsunagakure to take control of the mission load in the land of rivers, but later, they might use the country's resources as bargaining chips to reconcile with the land of fire's daimyo. So it's not just the daimyos of the land of rivers and the land of wind, and Tsunagakure, who want to avoid a full-scale war. The daimyo of the land of fire does too. If Konoha loses this battle, the land of fire's daimyo would certainly suffer losses, but it wouldn't be catastrophic. But Konoha would lose more than just the mission load in the land of rivers. Minato's eyes filled with admiration. He had intelligence to support his analysis, but Shishi had inferred all of this from just a bit of information and he wasn't wrong. What a sharp political instinct. With talent like this, he's absolutely suited to be Hokage. Minato thought, and said aloud, "Your analysis is spot on." Shisui, too, was inwardly impressed. As expected of Shishi, his insight is extraordinary. But Sani Kurama was bewildered. He felt that Shishi's words were convoluted, and only understood one thing. Konoha must not lose. Chapter 60, Blue Flame Sky Blade. Having grasped the key point, Kurama-Sani asked, "Minato-sensei, according to what Shoki said, we can't afford to lose. As the vanguard team, do we have a particularly crucial mission?" Minato Namikaze nodded. "Of course. Our first task is to take control of this town in front of us. Afterward, others will come to replace us. The second step is to penetrate deeper into the land of rivers, disrupt the Sand Ninja's current arrangements, and draw out Sand Village's forces, creating opportunities for the teams that will follow. So, this is an A-rank mission. Uchiha Shisui and Kurama Sani's expressions became more serious than ever. It wasn't just because of the mission's A-rank classification but also due to the inherent dangers of going deep behind enemy lines. Meanwhile, Hashida Shoaki was pondering that even if they succeeded in this mission, it would be difficult for Konoha to secure a victory, especially without a full-scale war. So, where is the key? Is it the daime of the Land of Rivers? No, it's the third Kazekage of Sand Village. But if we target the third Kazekage, it risks triggering an all-out war, so maybe it is the daime of the Land of Rivers. Shoaki grasped the critical point, but it had little to do with their current mission. Next, we'll use shadow clones to infiltrate the town, gather intelligence, locate the sand ninjas, and eliminate them as quickly as possible. Minato outlined the plan, which was straightforward yet aggressive. The four of them created shadow clones and moved out. As they neared the town, Shoaki and Shisui transformed into a wildcat and a raccoon, slipping into the town unnoticed. Meanwhile, Minato and Kurama Sani, after Shoaki and Shisui had entered the town, used the Flying Thunder God technique to teleport inside. Once inside, the four split up, moving through the streets and alleys to search for any signs of the sand ninjas. Suddenly, Shoaki halted, noticing a shadow flicker by. He immediately leaped onto a rooftop and spotted a figure moving swiftly in the direction he had just come from. A sand ninja. However, Shoaki didn't pursue. The sand ninja's movements were too conspicuous. Since he wasn't skilled in genjutsu, it would be better for someone like Shisui to handle it. Instead, Shoaki decided to trace the sand ninja's tracks in reverse, hoping to uncover other sand ninjas or their base in the town. As expected, it wasn't long before Shoaki, following the traces and listening to the conversations of some townspeople, identified that the sand ninja's base was in the manor right in the center of the town. Without delay, Shoaki dispelled his shadow clone. Outside the town, when Shoaki received the memories from his clone, Minato already had feedback. The sand ninja he had seen was the same one Minato and Kurama Sani had captured. With the information verified, Minato didn't wait for feedback from Shisui's shadow clone. He placed his hands on Shisui and Kurama Sani's shoulders, while Shoaki placed his hand on Minato's arm. The next moment, the four of them vanished from where they stood and reappeared inside a woodshed. Nearby lay the sand ninja they had captured, already dealt with, and beside him was Minato's Flying Thunder God Kunao. According to the intel, there were two sand ninja squads in this town, one led by a Jonin with 3 Chunin, and another led by a Chunin with 3 Genin. The Jonin-led team was stationed in the manor and patrolled the area regularly. The sand ninja they had captured was part of the patrol. The Chunin squad, on the other hand, was dispersed in 4 directions around the town, guarding the main roads. They were disguised as ordinary townspeople rather than wearing ninja attire. The Jonin-led sand ninja squad will be handled by me. Shisui, Shoaki, and Sani, you 3 will take care of the Chunin squad, Minato Namikaze instructed. Shisui, you'll focus on the Chunin, while Shoaki and Sani will deal with the 3 Genin. When I initiate the attack, it'll cause quite a commotion. That will prompt the Chunin squad to react, which will expose them. Understood. The 3 responded in unison, and with that, all 4 vanished from their spot. After leaving, Shoaki immediately split into 2, with one clone heading north and the other west. His task was to eliminate the 2 Genin in those directions. Before long, both Shoaki and his shadow clone reached their respective destinations, each in the form of a wildcat. After surveying the area, they quickly identified their targets. However, Shoaki didn't act immediately and waited in silence. Moments later, a loud rumbling sound came from the center of the town. The 2 Genin, whom Shoaki had been watching, immediately reacted, leaping onto the rooftops to investigate the smoke rising from the town center, then swiftly rushed toward it. Shoaki and his shadow clone acted quickly, launching a surprise attack from the side. Slash! Blood spurted as the 2 sand ninjas collapsed, clutching their throats, never even glimpsing Shoaki's face. With the 2 enemies dispatched, the shadow clone dispersed, while Shoaki headed straight for the town center. By the time he arrived, Minato had already finished the battle. Soon, Uchiha Shisui and Kurama Sani joined them, both having successfully completed their respective tasks. Next target, Shenliao Town. Minato declared. Ignoring the chaos that had erupted in the town, Minato led Shoaki and the others directly toward their next target. Upon reaching Shenliao Town, the group infiltrated and gathered intelligence using the same method. Unlike the previous town, Shanliao town was guarded by 3 sand ninja squads, each led by a jonin, positioned in a triangular formation at 3 key locations. Additionally, the 3 sand ninja squads had set up elevated observation points to assist their patrols. Shoaki and the others quickly realized that even if they silently took down one of the patrolling sand ninjas, it would be detected almost immediately. If they launched a surprise attack on one base, the other 2 would respond rapidly, arriving within a minute or 2. It became clear that the 2 squads in the previous town were merely for early warning. Now, Shoaki and his team faced at least 3 jonin. After gathering the necessary information from the outskirts, the team hid inside a room, where Minato gave his orders. We'll split into 2 groups. Shisui, you'll pair up with Shoaki. Sani, you'll be with me. Sani and I will launch a surprise attack on the eastern Sand Ninja Squad. Shisui, Shoaki, you 2 will intercept the Sand Ninja Squad coming from the north. Understood. They all replied in unison. The plan was to execute a lightning-fast strike. After receiving their orders, the 4 immediately split up. Disguised as a stray dog and a stray cat using the transformation jutsu, Shoaki and Shisui took their positions near a pile of garbage, waiting silently. In less than 3 minutes, an explosion erupted from the east, prompting the Sand Ninja squads in the north and south to spring into action, rushing toward the eastern side. As the Sand Ninja squad leaped over his head, Shoaki, disguised as a stray dog, swiftly moved, jumping from the rooftops. In midair, he returned to his human form. Fire style, Great Fireball Jutsu. A fireball with a diameter exceeding 5 meters surged toward the Sand Ninja squad's back. Almost simultaneously, Uchiha Shisui launched a Great Fireball Jutsu from the right. His fireball was even larger than Shoaki's. Watch out! The 2 Sand Ninja at the rear turned around, but they were too close to react with a jutsu. However, they remained composed despite the surprise, and with a flick of their arms, they hurled kunai attached with explosive tags. Boom! The explosive tags detonated, dispersing the 2 massive fireballs. The close-range explosion sent the 2 rear Sand Ninjas flying, crashing to the ground, while another barely managed to land on a rooftop. The jonin leading them also stopped in his tracks. But Hashida Shoaki and Uchiha Shisui were already prepared. Shoaki used the chakra burst technique taught by Tsunade to execute the body flicker jutsu, closing the distance to the fallen Sand Ninja in an instant and beheading him with a swift slash. Shisui, even faster with his own body flicker jutsu, locked eyes with another Sand Ninja just as he was getting up. The Sand Ninja froze in that moment, and before he could react, Shisui's blade flashed, leaving a thin line of blood across his neck. Shoaki, be careful! Shisui shouted. After dispatching one enemy, Shoaki looked up to see the Sand Ninja above him, already completing hand signs. His cheeks puffed out as he unleashed a powerful gust of wind. Boom! The wind roared, carrying hidden wind blades that cut through the air with a deafening sound. The buildings and walls in the wind's path, whether made of earth or wood, were left with deep cuts as if struck by a sword. Shoaki and Shisui quickly took cover behind a building. The storm subsided quickly, and the jonin descended from above, sword raised to strike at Shoaki's head. At the critical moment, Shoaki sidestepped the strike, drawing his own blade from his waist. He ducked low and sprang forward like a rabbit, slashing horizontally from right to left, aiming at the enemy's abdomen. Simultaneously, a blue light began to cover Shoaki's Totsuka blade from hilt to tip, the intense heat distorting the air and light around it. The speed of the slash left a trail of warped afterimages. A-rank Kenjutsu, Blue Flame Sky Blade. The blue light covering the Totsuka blade was actually high-temperature flames formed by fire-release chakra nature transformation, reaching up to 4000 degrees Celsius, the current limit of Shoaki's abilities. As the Sand Ninja raised his sword to block, the distortion of the air and light caused him to misjudge the position of Shoaki's blade. The Totsuka blade sliced through half of the Sand Ninja's sword, then cut through his vest, skin, organs, and spine, splitting him in 2 at the waist. The speed and heat of the blade were so intense that no blood flowed from the wound, and the Sand Ninja's body remained upright, propped up by his sword. Without looking back, Shoaki dashed toward Shisui. At that moment, Shisui was engaging the Sand Jonin in a fast-paced battle, using his unique body flicker jutsu. Seeing Shoaki arrive so quickly, the Sand Jonin's eyes widened in disbelief. Impossible! Under the cover of his wind release technique, and with the experienced Tsunasoke having the upper hand, he couldn't believe that this Konoha brat had defeated him so swiftly. These 2 Konoha brats are no ordinary shinobi. The Sand Jonin made a split-second decision, leaping into the air while completing hand signs. His chest expanded as he prepared to exhale. Wind release, great breakthrough. This technique generated a pure gust of wind, unlike the earlier one laced with wind blades. There wasn't enough time for a more complex jutsu, and any delay would leave him vulnerable. Shisui's body flicker clones could easily withstand such an attack, but the real Shisui hidden among them was blown off the rooftop, causing the other clones to dissipate as well. Meanwhile, Shoki burst forward with a surge of chakra under his feet, charging up the rooftop against the wind. As the Sand Jonin descended, he quickly began forming hand signs, but before he could complete them, Shoki unleashed a stream of flames from his mouth, which quickly expanded into a large fireball. This brat didn't even form hand signs. The Sand Jonin was shocked once more but had no choice but to abandon his jutsu. He drew his sword, infused with wind release chakra, and sliced through the fireball. Shoki then raised one hand, summoning two shadow clones, each wielding a Totsuka blade. They both charged at the Sand Jonin as he landed. At the same time, Shisui launched a volley of shuriken, whizzing through the air to harass the Sand Jonin. The Sand Jonin parried the attacks with his blade, quickly engaging in a close-quarters fight with Shoki and his clones. The Jonin's speed was undoubtedly faster than Shoki's, and his wind-release-enhanced blade was equally sharp and lethal. Yet, the Sand Jonin found himself at a disadvantage. Despite his superior speed, his attacks were either blocked or evaded. Damned brat! Gritting his teeth, the Sand Jonin created an opening in his defense, taking the opportunity to destroy one of Shoki's clones. He then used his shoulder armor to absorb another strike from the second clone before kicking it, causing it to disperse. Wind release chakra surged in his left hand as he grabbed Shoki Hashida's Totsuka blade barehanded, while his right hand thrust a katana straight at Shoki. Clang! Uchiha Shisui intervened just in time, blocking the strike. In that instant, the Totsuka blade in Shoki's hand was enveloped in a blue glow, casting a pale blue light on all three of their faces. Blue flame sky blade. The intense heat distorted the air. The Sand Jonin's pupils dilated in shock as he tried to pull back, but it was too late. The Totsuka blade sliced through the wind release chakra covering his hand, cutting his palm open. With a scream of agony, the Sand Jonin staggered back. But Shoki and Shisui didn't let up, launching a relentless flurry of attacks. Clang! Clang! Sparks flew as the Jonin parried Shisui's strikes. But after a few exchanges, the Jonin's katana was cleaved in two by the Totsuka blade. Taking advantage of the opening, Shisui slashed across the Jonin's chest, tearing through his flak jacket. Enraged and in pain, the Jonin retaliated with a powerful kick, sending Shisui flying. Ignoring Shisui as he was knocked back, Shoki pressed the attack. With a swift strike, he severed the Jonin's short sword and then sliced off his right arm before finishing with a lethal slash to the throat. The Sand Jonin's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at the panting Shoki. He fell to the ground, his body split in two. Shisui, are you okay? Shoki asked, turning his head. Shisui clutched his stomach and shook his head. That kick had almost knocked the wind out of him. Although his eyes had seen the attack coming, it was too fast, and he couldn't avoid it after committing to his own strike. This Jonin was truly formidable. At that moment, Minato Namikaze arrived with Kurama-Sani, teleporting directly to Shoki and Shisui using the Flying Thunder God Kunao they carried. Seeing that the enemies had been dealt with, Minato first expressed surprise, then gave a heartfelt compliment, well done. But Shoki, your chakra. Shoki sheathed his sword and made a hand sign. Don't worry, Minato-sensei. It's not a problem. As he spoke, he released an incomplete yin seal. The chakra he had stored for the past 6 months flowed from his forehead, rejuvenating his depleted body. However, this also meant that the yin seal Shoki had painstakingly worked on for half a year was now undone, and he would need to start over from scratch. But that was exactly why he had created the yin seal in the first place for moments like this. He had no regrets. Minato-sensei, more sand ninjas are coming. Kurama-Sani warned. Shoki and the others looked up to see 4 sand ninjas closing in. Their reinforcement speed was faster than expected. As soon as Minato and Kurama had finished dealing with their enemies, the Southern Sand Ninja Squad had already arrived. Worried about Shoki and Shisui, Minato and Kurama had only engaged the enemy briefly before retreating. But as the Sand Ninja Squad approached and saw the aftermath of the battle, the lead Jonin immediately ordered, retreat. Both of their squads had been wiped out in such a short time. Konoha's team was far stronger than they had anticipated. End of chapter.
Thanks for listening.